to make up for the hell that she went through. Those who have experienced war rarely talk about its horrors. When they do, they might tell funny stories with all the horrors hidden in plain sight, but hidden by other words. Ken and Sadie went through, as I've already said, the unimaginable, and their thoughts were first and foremost always with their loved ones. They were both people of faith who found Christ's love wide and high and deep, unchanging and tender for the most broken and vulnerable, so profound it shaped them to be the people they were after the war. This VE Day I give thanks for the men and women of faith and no faith who served and made this world a place of peace and opportunity for people like you and me to live in and be the people we are without fear. Today we must recognise how precious peace is and to work to make it happen each and every day. Thank you.
The next item of business is topical questions, and at question number 1, excuse me, I call Katy Clark.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its response is to reports that the number of new rape cases being reported to the police has increased by more than a third since 2020-2021.
Cabinet Secretary Angela Constance.
Presiding Officer, sexual violence is abhorrent, which is why we are taking robust action through the Equally Safe strategy, focusing on prevention, ensuring that perpetrators are held to account and improving our laws, such as through the current Victims' Witness and Justice Reform Bill, which would introduce a sexual offences court. Of course, I am concerned by any rise in new rape cases being reported. There are multiple potential factors behind this, including a greater willingness of victims to come forward. I very much want people to have continued confidence in reporting such crimes and encourage victims and survivors to access support services, which is why we have increased funding to Rape Crisis Scotland's national advocacy project with over £6 million over the next 3 years. Ultimately, though, of course, it is those who perpetrate violence and abuse, the majority of whom are men, that must change their actions and behaviour. It is only through fundamental societal change that women can be protected.
Katy Clark.
Does the Cabinet Secretary believe that there has been a rise in the levels of rape in society in recent years, or does she believe that this increase relates to higher levels of reporting, as she mentioned? And is the Scottish Government doing any work to try and get a better understanding of whether there is an increase in sexual violence, particularly given some of the challenges we know we face?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I very much thank Ms Clark for her topical question today, and I suppose this has been the conundrum that many of us have wrestled with. We know that historically and indeed presently that underreporting remains an issue, and any endeavours that improves this and encourages more victims and witnesses to come forward is, of course, to be welcomed. So I suppose my answer is a bit of both. I am concerned that sexual offences remain underreported. The answer would be yes. And am I concerned about the prevalence of sexual offending in society? Absolutely.
Katy Clark.
Interesting to maybe hear from the Cabinet Secretary on another occasion as to whether they are doing any work to look at these underlying trends. But what information can the Cabinet Secretary give about the profile of women who are reporting rape? For example, whether it tends to be younger women or older women, and whether there have been changes in recent years, because there has been suggestions that there has been an increase in rape reports from very young women and girls reporting rape. And does she understand that to be the case, or is it something that she is looking at?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, it was remiss of me not to say to Ms Clark in her first supplementary that we of course will work and continue to work with all partners across the justice system, in particular police, Crown Office and the courts, to understand the specific underlying factors, and of course victim support organisations who we work with and support will have a perspective on this that will add to the fundamental facts and profile of victims and witnesses. There are, of course, concerns that, due to the nature of offending, including online offending, that there is a wider range of women affected. It has always been the case that there have been particular myths around rape, that it was predominantly targeted towards younger women, when we know that historically women over 40 are at risk to the same degree. But I will endeavour to get far more granular and up-to-date information to Ms Clark and indeed Chamber.
Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I think, as highlighted in Katy Clark's line of questioning, there are many factors behind changes in the incidence of reporting of sexual offences. And this latest increase is to be taken very seriously. And I hope it is a reflection that more women feel able to come forward. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if she can further outline what action the Scottish Government is taking to ensure every woman who comes forward feels respected and supported throughout the whole process?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, we all want women to feel that they can report sexual offences, knowing that they will be taken seriously and treated with respect at each stage, from reporting to the police through to any court action. However, I recognise that going through the court process can be extremely challenging for victims, which is why we are actively aiming to improve the experience through the Victims, Witness and Justice Reform Bill. And key reforms there are about embedding trauma-informed practice and introducing statutory anonymity for victims of sexual offences, which I hope will continue to support victims and encourage public confidence in reporting. And in addition to that, we want women to be supported by specialist organisations, which is why we'll invest £21.6 million in the Delivering Equally Safe, which supports 115 projects.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In 2023 to 24, the median time from offence to verdict for non-historic sexual offences, including rape and sexual assault, was over 3 years. Now, Victim Support Scotland are clear that long court delays make victims less likely to report crimes. So since those figures came out, what precisely has the Cabinet Secretary done to reduce those timescales, and when will victims see results?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, victims are right now seeing results in terms of the overall delay and in terms of addressing the court backlog. I do accept, of course, that the time for solemn cases to reach conclusion is too long, and while the reduction in the COVID court backlog has reduced significantly, it's reduced by more than 50%, the number of outstanding scheduled trials is now less than 20,000. At its peak, it was 42,000. But we do accept there is much more to do with regards to solemn cases, bearing in mind that we are seeing increasing reports of serious sexual offences, which may well result in increasing prosecutions, which every indication is that our courts, particularly our solemn courts, will continue to be busy.
Faisal Chowdhury. Thank you,
Presiding Officer. Last week, constituents contacted me worried about risk of rape and sexual attack in public parks in Edinburgh. They mentioned the lack of lighting, making our park unsafe at night, especially in winter. Can the Cabinet Secretary advise how the Scottish Government is ensuring our built environment is not contributing to these horrific attacks?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, Mr Chowdhury raised an important issue about the physical environment, and the Scottish Government works with our partners in local government via COSLA, albeit that the safety and lighting is, of course, an issue for local government. But I go back to my initial answer. Women will be safer in this country when men change their behaviour.
Thank you. Question number 2, Stephen Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what immediate action it will take to address the reported failure by NHS boards to publish significant adverse event reviews related to mother and baby deaths in hospitals.
Minister Jenny Minto.
Healthcare Improvement Scotland published its updated national framework for reviewing and learning from adverse events in NHS Scotland in February this year. NHS boards must operate within this robust national framework. This includes a template for sharing learning from adverse events locally and nationally. The Scottish Perinatal Network have facilitated tailored cross-board learning opportunities following adverse events to share learning across the maternity and neonatal community. The Scottish Government is currently meeting directly with leaders from all NHS boards as part of a programme of work to improve significant adverse event reviews. This includes ongoing engagement with Healthcare Improvement Scotland on the renewed approach to reviews. My officials are meeting with Healthcare Improvement Scotland on the 15th of May to discuss this important work.
Stephen Kerr.
I'm grateful to the Minister for her response to the question. And can I begin by paying tribute to the Sunday Post journalist Marion Scott, whose outstanding public interest journalism has once again exposed failings that have devastating consequences for families in Scotland. Now, we know that despite the Information Commissioner saying that they can, more than 500 redacted significant adverse event reviews into avoidable deaths of mothers and babies have not been published. Not one. These are tragedies that should have been investigated and learned from. Instead, they've been hidden. So, can I ask the Minister, how on earth has this been allowed to happen under a government that promised openness and accountability after previous maternity care scandals? What exactly, or when exactly, was the Minister made aware of this widespread failure by NHS boards to publish these reports, and what did she do about it?
Minister.
I thank Stephen Kerr for his supplementary question. Any death of a mother or baby is a tragedy, and I extend my heartfelt sympathies and condolences to all who have experienced this trauma. We have to recognise that the vast amount of public engagement with National Health Services, our National Health Service, is positive, but we are certainly not complacent. And I read the piece in the Sunday Post on Sunday. And I understand that from Healthcare Improvement Scotland that the Scottish Information Commissioner determined in 2023 in response to an FOI request that individual SEERs were effectively part of the patient record, and NHS boards would be at risk of breaching patient confidentiality if they were to be published in full. However, as I highlighted in my first answer, the Scottish Perinatal Network has done a lot of work in this to ensure that patients, families and carers are at the centre of the review process, and also, importantly, the safety and the psychological safety of staff.
Stephen Kerr.
I appreciate what the Minister is saying. However, we're talking about the redacted reports. We're not talking about the full reports. We're talking about the redacted reports. And we're talking about children who have died, about mothers who have been lost. We're talking about families who have been left with no answers, no justice, no access to reports that should have been shared with them as a matter of basic human decency. So can I ask the Minister, when a family has lost a baby and asks to see the review into what happened, is there any justification, any at all, for refusing them that redacted information? Will the Minister say now, unequivocally, that these reports must be published? And does she agree with me that there can be no place, none, for secrecy or defensiveness in our NHS, that families deserve the truth, that accountability is not an optional extra, but the absolute minimum we owe to those who have suffered the worst possible imaginable loss?
Minister.
The SEER review is a review carried out by experts into what went wrong and why. It's there to create a fuller picture of what happened and also what changes need to be made as a result. These are learning and system learning exercises which are incredibly important. And the revised framework that was introduced by HIS includes a template for boards to use when reviewing SEERs, and it also includes a new learning summary template which will be published on a new online community of practice once completed.
Thank you. Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In addition to what the Minister is describing about actions in adverse event reviews, could the Minister please advise what updates the Scottish Government has had from health boards across the country regarding the steps which are being taken to sustain and enhance maternity services, including in Wigtonshire in the west of NHS D&G region?
Minister.
The Scottish Government published a suite of documents for implementation by NHS boards on the 6th of February 2025. These were produced to support the aim of improving maternity and neonatal care in Scotland and were the product of a co-development approach, drawing on the expertise of our clinical and third sector partners. We are currently developing a robust process for monitoring progress towards implementation. And our Best Start report will be published in the coming weeks, and this will summarise responses from all NHS boards on implementation of the recommendations in the Best Start across Scotland.
Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We did know about these concerns previously. Whistleblowers at NHS Lothian raised concerns about staff shortages at a maternity unit last year. An investigation launched back in 2024 found that there has been a toxic relationship between managers and midwives. One midwife, who remained anonymous, spoke to STV News last year and said management didn't listen to staff concerns. We'd say we're short-staffed and they'd say it was fine. I imagine that this will not be the only case in terms of health board relationships between managers and midwives. So can I ask the Minister, how do we correct that culture to improve relationships between managers and midwives and to encourage whistleblowing should there be concerns?
Minister.
I welcome the apology from NHS Lothian to its maternity care staff following the report of the independent review of its women's services. NHS Lothian has committed to working with staff in maternity services to ensure they feel supported at work, safe to raise concerns and able to thrive. And I expect NHS Lothian to take forward this work as a priority to ensure that this learning is translated promptly into action to improve staff experience at work so they are empowered to continue to deliver the best, safest care possible for mothers, their babies and their families.
Carol Mockin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank Stephen Kerr for raising this really important issue in the Chamber, and I hope the Minister will have more to say about this issue. Families deserve more. Can I also ask, though, does the Minister feel that the Government has done enough to ensure the shared learning from significant adverse events happens for the staff? Because if the families are not getting details, how do we make sure these things do not happen again and our staff are also at risk?
Minister.
I thank Carol Mockin for her question and agree that we have to ensure we get the right support for our staff that are working in our NHS maternity units. As I highlighted in one of my responses to Mr Kerr, one of the key things that the Scottish Perinatal Network highlighted was the importance of the psychological safety of the staff. And in my response to Megan Gallagher's question, I very much support the work that NHS Lothian are doing to ensure that their staff get the right support to ensure that they can carry out their roles, which are incredibly important to all of us that live in Scotland.
And Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, it seems right now that the only answers available to the bereaved families at the heart of this is in the journalism of the Sunday Post. They're getting precious little from Scottish ministers and nothing from this chamber. The Minister will recall that on 2 occasions last year, following a spike in neonatal deaths and adverse neonatal ward events in 2021 and in 2022, I asked the First Minister or the Minister in question to make time available in government time to debate these findings. She said at first she would look at that and then secondly told me there were no plans to. Will she now, at the third time of asking, make parliamentary time available for consideration of these very concerning events?
Minister.
I thank Cole-Hamilton for his question and remember our previous conversations on this. I'm content to take that away.
Thank you. That concludes topical questions. And before we move to the First Minister's statement, I invite members to join me in welcoming to the gallery the Honourable Pat Weir MP, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Parliament of Queensland. Thank you. The next item of business is a statement by John Swinney On Programme for Government 2025 to 2026, the First Minister will take questions at the end of his statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on the First Minister.
Presiding Officer, tomorrow will mark 1 year since I was honoured to be elected as the First Minister of this country that I love. I spoke then of my ambition to create a vibrant economy in every part of our country, my determination to tackle the challenges faced by our beloved National Health Service, and my hope that we can come together as a Parliament and as a country to focus on solutions rather than allowing our disagreements to dominate. Over the past year, amidst real challenges, amidst deep uncertainty on the global stage, progress has been made. In ways big and small, a corner is being turned. This is a government that is working hard and determined to get Scotland on track for success. That progress has been evident in the way we do our business here in our Parliament. The fact that 4 parties were able to come together to negotiate in good faith and pass a budget that delivers record funding for our National Health Service is testament to what is possible. Today's programme for government is presented in that same spirit. It contains many of the fruits of our budget process, with elements within it that are there only because of the cooperation of other parties. But this is also a programme by an SNP government, a government that cares deeply about Scotland, a government that has total confidence in Scotland's ability to rise to any challenge and to weather any storm. Presiding Officer, before I turn to those elements that are in the programme for government, I want to talk about some measures that are not included. With a year to go until the end of this Parliament, there are clearly limits on the amount of legislation we can present. This government, and I personally, remain entirely committed to tackling misogynistic abuse against women. Regrettably, I do not believe there is sufficient parliamentary time to make progress through a standalone bill, which I would plan to bring forward at the start of the next Parliament. We will, however, take the action we can in this Parliament by adding sex as a protected characteristic to existing hate crimes legislation to protect women and girls, and by taking further steps in our policy to tackle unacceptable abuse of women and girls in our society. Conversion practices that seek to change or suppress a person's sexual orientation or gender identity are harmful and abusive. Over this coming year, we will seek to work with the United Kingdom Government to deliver a legislative ban across England, Wales and Scotland. But if agreement is not possible, we will publish legislation in the first year of the next parliamentary term. Members of the LGBTQI+ community should have no doubt that we will work with them to protect and to defend their rights. Times are tough, Presiding Officer, and times are changing in ways that I know bring real anxiety to our citizens, real fear to many in our business community. But my promise to the people of Scotland is that amidst the uncertainty, there is one thing they can be sure of. This is a government that will always seek to do what is best for Scotland. As First Minister, I will always put the needs and interests, the hopes and dreams of the people of Scotland first. When I became First Minister a year ago, I heard loud and clear people's concerns about the health of Scotland's NHS. They would tell me about their many positive experiences of high-quality care from the dedicated staff in the NHS, experiences of treatment and care that are invariably world-class. But they also spoke of difficulties accessing that care, waiting times that were unacceptable, adding to anxiety, systems that they felt did not put patients first. Presiding Officer, there are many issues that compete on a daily basis for the attention of a First Minister, but what could be more important than our National Health Service? So I'm proud that the £30 million that we committed has not just delivered the 64,000 additional NHS appointments and procedures between April of last year and the end of January this year that we promised, but over 40,000 more than planned. An extra 105,000 vital additional appointments and procedures that are helping to reduce waiting lists and waiting times. We have met the children and adolescent mental health waiting time standards, with over 90% now seen within 18 weeks of their referral. More cancer patients are now treated faster. Compared with a decade ago, 16% more patients receive care within the 31-day standard and 11% more within the 62-day standard. Statistics, yes, but behind each one a person who has received the sort of reliable and effective care from the National Health Service that they deserve. Progress, yes, but with a very clear understanding that there is more, much more to do. And that is why a renewed and stronger NHS is at the very heart of this programme for government. Getting our NHS on track is about reform that is fundamentally patient-centred, it is about investment, and it's about increasing productivity and capacity. This approach makes it possible for us to deliver more than 150,000 extra appointments and procedures in 2025-26. The additional investment secured through the Scottish Budget will enable us to expand specialist regional centres. Technology will mean more efficient use of operating theatres. The result? A 50% increase in the number of surgical procedures we can deliver compared with this year. There will be a renewed focus on cancer diagnosis and treatment, targeted investment so that health boards can clear backlogs and substantially improve waiting times. Presiding Officer, I could spend the whole statement just talking about the steps we are taking to access the National Health Service. But before moving on to other issues, I will highlight one other area that I know is of particular concern to many people. While many people's experience of their GP service is excellent, for many others there is deep frustration over the difficulty making appointments and what has been described as the ATM lottery. This is of central importance to me. That is why we are acting to reduce pressure and increase capacity in the system so that it is easier for people to get the care that they need when they need it. That includes, in the year ahead, a further expansion of Pharmacy First services, with pharmacies being the right first port of call for many ailments. But it also means the delivery of an extra 100,000 appointments in GP surgeries focused on key risk factors such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity and smoking. This year, primary care, including GPs, is receiving a bigger share of new NHS funding, and we are committed to not only increasing GP numbers but protecting Scotland's advantage, which means substantially more GPs per head in Scotland compared to elsewhere in the United Kingdom.
Thank you.
Presiding Officer, members across the Chamber will know that alongside the NHS, our constituents are also deeply exercised about the ongoing cost of living crisis. We have experienced a decade and more of financial insecurity, higher prices and squeezed real incomes. Life feels substantially tougher for many of those that we serve. The economy means jobs, growth and investment, and I will talk about all of these elements. But above all, the economy is about people's quality of life. It is about their own household budget, their ability to pay the bills. The Scottish Government will always do what it can to deliver the best deal for the people of Scotland. In concrete terms, that means a commitment to keep council tax bills, already 30% lower on average in Scotland than in England, substantially lower than elsewhere in the UK. Water bills, already 20% lower than in England, will remain lower, as will income tax for the majority of workers in Scotland. Prescriptions will continue to be free here in Scotland. Eye appointments free. Bus travel for young, disabled and older people in Scotland free. Scotland will continue to pay no tuition fees. Parents will continue to benefit from a package of early learning and childcare worth more than £6,000 for every eligible child. Free school meals, which save the average family £400 per child per year, will be expanded and more breakfast clubs introduced. Together, this is my cost of living guarantee, a package that year on year delivers savings for the people of Scotland, a package that exists nowhere else in the United Kingdom.
Thank you. Thank you.
And, Presiding Officer, it is a package of cost of living support that we are always looking to enhance where we can. That is why we took the decision in the budget to restore a winter fuel payment for Scottish pensioners, with the poorest receiving the most. Those payments will be made this year, and it is why we are committed to doing even more. Last year, in the face of severe budget pressures, we took the difficult decision to end the peak fares pilot on our railways. But now, given the work that we have done to get Scotland's finances in a stronger position, and hearing also the calls from commuters, from climate activists and from the business community, I can confirm that from the 1st of September this year, peak rail fares in Scotland will be scrapped for good.
Thank you.
A decision that will put more money in people's pockets and mean less CO2 is pumped into our skies. Once again, tens of thousands of Scots saving money. Once again, a better deal for people because they live in Scotland. Better for Scots because there's a government that always strives for what is best for Scotland. Alongside the cost of living pressures, the consequence of a series of body blows from austerity and Brexit to the spike in inflation and energy costs that followed Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, new threats are emerging that have the potential to cause extensive damage to the Scottish economy. Tariffs will impact directly on many Scottish exporters to the United States, while a US recession and a global trade war will have direct effects and indirect effects on almost every sector of our economy. Presiding Officer, this programme for government has been published earlier than usual, in part because it allows a clear year of delivery on the NHS and other public services, delivery in those areas that matter in the day-to-day lives of our citizens. But it has also been published now because of the scale of the looming economic challenge that we face. For the sake of Scottish jobs, for the sake of protecting people's quality of life, we are taking new steps, accelerating action to ensure Scotland's economy is better placed to ride the economic storms. Members will see the detailed and extensive section on the economy in the Programme for Government document, with action on planning reform, skills, housing investment, support for our rural economy, including our vital food and drink sector, promotion of Scotland the brand and more. But I want to highlight three particular initiatives designed to respond directly and specifically to the challenges we now face. First, working with Scottish Development International across their 34 international offices, we will deliver a new 6-point export plan to enable Scottish exporters to diversify and to grow markets. This includes more support for SMEs to participate in trade missions in both established and emerging markets, additional grant funding to help companies unlock specific targeted international growth, and bespoke support in key sectors, technology, life sciences, renewables and hydrogen, to maximise international opportunities. Second, to enable emerging Scottish companies to grow, we will create a new proof of concept fund with a focus on supporting the commercialisation of research projects with significant economic potential. We will deliver an improved ecosystem fund to further enhance Scotland's already effective start-up environment, including action to transform the number of women who start and scale up businesses. We must not forget, even amongst the gathering clouds, that Scotland is an innovative nation and that opportunities exist which can deliver real and significant benefits now and in the future. This government will prepare for the challenges, but we also seek to position Scotland to make the most of the many and significant economic opportunities that still exist. Third, we will deepen our commitment to a just transition and an industrial future for Scotland. As members will be aware, the Deputy First Minister is actively engaging with potential investors to ensure a green industrial future for the Grangemouth site. A key element in the success of this work is the development of carbon capture in Scotland, which is why it is now vital that the UK Government provides support not only to carbon capture projects in England, but also to the Acorn project in Scotland's North East. The Scottish Government has previously committed up to £80 million to make this happen if the UK Government, in turn, made the commitments necessary for the project to progress. Given the importance of this project for the Scottish economy, given its place at the very heart of the green industrialisation that is my ambition, and I trust the ambition of all parties in this chamber, my government is now willing, as part of a wider package of investment in industrial transformation, to remove that cap and increase the amount of Scottish funding that is available to make Acorn a reality should the project be given the go-ahead by the United Kingdom Government. I know many in this chamber share my concern that Scotland is little more than an afterthought to a UK Government that is willing to invest in a supercomputer in the south east of England weeks after cancelling the supercomputer for Edinburgh. A UK Government that moved heaven and earth to save Scunthorpe but will not do the same for Grangemouth. Perhaps with swift action from the UK Government to support Acorn, which in turn will help us to deliver the future that Grangemouth deserves, the Prime Minister will do the right thing by Grangemouth.
Thank you.
Presiding Officer, working to deliver a stronger NHS, giving the people of Scotland the best cost of living support of any part of the United Kingdom, and action to protect Scotland's economy and maximise our economic potential in the face of global challenges, this is a government with what is best for Scotland at its heart. Since becoming First Minister last year, I have sought to focus government efforts on 4 central priorities. We seek a wealthier Scotland, higher standards of living for the people of Scotland, with action to grow Scotland's economy. A fairer Scotland, with Scotland's growing wealth shared more fairly so that we can remove the scourge of child poverty in our land. A greener Scotland, with action to maximise the benefits felt by the people of Scotland from our renewable energy wealth, benefits in terms of lower bills and well-paid jobs, and action to reduce emissions and protect and restore our stunning natural environment. And we seek public services that meet and indeed exceed the expectations of the people of Scotland. Have no doubt, many already do. But where action is needed to reform and renew, this government will take it. Progress for Scotland underpins each of our priorities and is at the heart of everything we will do. I want a Scotland that we can be proud of, a Scotland that is the best it can possibly be. That ambition is what gets me up every single morning. And at the very heart of that is the eradication of child poverty. Last year, when I presented my programme for government, I referred to the eradication of child poverty as the moral compass of my government. It remains so. It will until there is no single child left in poverty in Scotland. It is also, I said, the greatest investment in our country's future that we can possibly make. And in these times of cost of living pressures, that investment becomes ever more important, for these things disproportionately hurt our society's poorest. That is why, over the course of this Parliament, we increased the Scottish Child Payment from the original proposal that was put to us of a £5 payment to £27.15 and created a broader package of family payments which can be worth roughly £25,000 by age 16. Our policies are making a difference. On average, the lowest income households with children are estimated to be £2,600 a year better off this year as a result of Scottish Government policies. By 2029-30, it's expected to grow to an average of £3,700. The proportion of children living in relative poverty has reached its lowest level since 2014-15, and Scotland is making deeper, quicker progress here than in the rest of the United Kingdom. And while the Joseph Rowntree Foundation predicts child poverty will rise in other parts of the United Kingdom by 2029, policies such as our Scottish Child Payment and our commitment to end the cruel two-child limit are, and I quote, behind Scotland bucking the trend. But if we want to truly eradicate child poverty in Scotland, we must go further, and I recognise that. We are taking the steps to lift the two-child limit and remain on track to deliver this measure to lift more children out of poverty next April. It is also about making sure that public services are more joined up in their response, more family and person-centred, so that vulnerable families receive the focused help they need rather than simply the help that is available. And in the coming year, we will consult on, develop and publish a Tackling Child Poverty Delivery Plan for 2026 to 31, outlining the actions we will take with our partners for low-income families across Scotland to keep us on the journey to meet our poverty reduction targets for 2030. I can assure members that this will focus on reducing household costs, boosting incomes through social security and helping more people into fair and sustainable jobs, all of which play a central part in tackling not only the symptoms but the root causes of poverty in our society. Presiding Officer, there is always much more that we are doing that can be mentioned in a short parliamentary statement. I would encourage members and their constituents to read the programme for government with care. They will see our ongoing commitment to achieving net zero by 2045, action to maximise the environmental and economic benefits from our vast renewable energy wealth, steps to decarbonise heating and further decarbonise our transport network. To give just one example, I am proud that we have achieved our target of installing 6,000 public charge points for electric vehicles 2 years ahead of schedule, but more is needed, which is why in the year ahead we will introduce a new rural and island EV infrastructure grant supporting our commitment to approximately 24,000 additional public electric vehicle charge points by 2030. The public will notice in our programme for government the priority we are giving to the ABCs of education, with action in partnership with local government, parents, carers, pupils and schools to raise attainment and address problems of attendance, to tackle head-on behavioural challenges in our classrooms and reform the curriculum so that young Scots are equipped fully to meet the challenges and seize the opportunities of this new age. There is action to help regenerate our town centres, investment in thousands of new homes, record funding for the culture sector, new protections for renters, expansion of dental provision, a focus on additional support needs in our schools and much, much more. Presiding Officer, this is a programme for government, but also a programme for a better Scotland, a programme for a stronger NHS, for a more resilient Scotland, for a wealthier Scotland, centred on delivery, providing hope. It is a programme that seeks what's best for Scotland, a programme for government that gets our nation on track for success.
Thank you. The First Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 40 minutes for questions, after which we'll move on to the next item of business, and I'd be grateful if members who wish to put a question were to press their request to speak buttons now. And I call on Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's flimsy programme for government is just more of the same from the SNP, and it will do little to restore public trust. No wonder that around 1 in 3 of their own MSPs couldn't even be bothered to turn up to listen to this. And that's because John Swinney is the politician who's failed to deliver for the past 18 years, the politician who's wasted more public money than anyone else, the politician who is now desperately trying to clear up his own mess. John Swinney can't possibly be the solution, because John Swinney has caused the problems. My party has long campaigned for greater spending on GPs who are on the front line of the NHS. John Swinney has today promised to increase GP numbers, but this same promise was made by the SNP 8 years ago, and it has not been kept. Does John Swinney think anyone out there will actually believe him this time? My party has also been the lone voice of opposition to repeated SNP income tax rises. Hard-working Scots pay £1.7 billion more than they would under tax bans for the rest of the UK. John Swinney today commits to stop turning the screw on Scottish taxpayers, but he's previously broken a similar promise not to raise taxes. So why did John Swinney not take this opportunity to reduce the painful tax burden that he has inflicted? People desperately want to see politicians focus on the key issues that impact their lives. Yet John Swinney says he's going to use even more taxpayers' money to try and find an economic case for independence. Well, he's not going to find one, because there isn't one. This is more of the same from the same old John Swinney, a politician who's completely obsessed by a lifelong pursuit of breaking up the United Kingdom. Does John Swinney really think it's right to waste time, energy and public money on this divisive nonsense when so many other issues need our urgent attention?
First Minister.
I see my appeal for common ground to be constructed in the Parliament has not exactly made much headway with Russell Finlay this afternoon, but it will not stop me continuing to try to find some common ground to make progress, Presiding Officer. On the question of GP services, the Government, as I indicated in my statement, will be allocating a greater proportion of new NHS funding to the primary care sector, which will benefit GPs and will result in the expansion of about 100,000 appointments within the GP sector on key conditions. On the question of income tax, I remind Parliament of the comment I made in my statement that the majority of workers in Scotland pay comparatively less tax and income tax than would be the case south of the border. They also pay lower council tax and water bills than is the case south of the border. And of course, if they send their children to universities in Scotland, they don't pay tuition fees either, which is a very formidable saving for families that lend to bread to the country, beyond the fact that, of course, if they have young children, they'll get access to early learning and childcare, which I presided over the expansion of as Education Secretary, which gives a benefit to families that lend them bread to the country. So all of those issues are relevant to the question about income tax. But the other point that's crucial about income tax is that Mr Finlay persists in coming to Parliament and telling us that he wants to reduce income tax, but he won't tell us about the cuts in public spending and public services that he will make to pay for it. And that's just one of the big flaws in the arguments that Mr Finlay puts forward, a £1 billion flaw in the argument. Now, lastly, Presiding Officer, Mr Finlay has raised my support for Scottish independence, which is, of course, a lifetime commitment that I have given to the question of independence. And one of the reasons why I want Scotland to be independent is I want Scotland to be a country that can enjoy a higher standard of living than is current within the United Kingdom. Why do I say that is more relevant today? Because of the Brexit that was championed by the Conservative Party, standards. Well, all of the evidence demonstrates my case that Brexit has resulted in a decline in the standard of living of people in this country. Brexit has resulted in a decline in the standard of living of people in this country. And the way for Scotland to overcome the damage of Brexit is to rejoin the European Union, and that's by being an independent country.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, is that it? After 18 years in power, and what could be John Swinney's last year in government, is that the best
Thank you. Let's hear one another.
It's embarrassing. Nicola Sturgeon's probably messaging to say it's awful right now. Although it's interesting to see that she turned up to do a press hurdle outside but didn't bother coming in for John Swinney's programme for government. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some things in here that I agree with, especially the bits that he's nicked from Scottish Labour. It's not exactly the borrowing powers that I thought the SNP had in mind. But, Presiding Officer, this statement fails to meet the challenges or ambitions of the people of Scotland. No recognition of the scale of the crisis in the NHS delivered by the SNP, with 1 in 6 Scots on a waiting list. Where is the plan to fix it? No recognition of the fact that our schools are falling down the league tables delivered by the SNP. No plan to fix it. No recognition of the fact that 10,000 children in Scotland are homeless, delivered by the SNP. Where is the plan to fix it? And no recognition of the billions of pounds of public money wasted, delivered by the SNP. Where is the plan to fix it? And the truth is, they have no plan, because after nearly 2 decades in government, if the SNP had a good idea, they would have delivered it by now. Instead, all we are left with is sticking plasters to cover and distract from the damage that the SNP have caused. It's an SNP government running down the clock. Next year, Scots will face a choice: a third decade with the SNP or a new direction and new leadership for Scotland.
Let's hear Mr Sarwar.
They don't want to hear it, Presiding Officer, but John Swinney has been at the heart of government for nearly 2 decades. So how can the man who broke it now be the one to pretend he can fix it?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, on the various issues that Mr Sarwar raised, let me just say that, of course, on the health service, we've seen increases in inpatient and day case activity over the 12 months to December 2024. And I cited in my statement the various improvements that have been made in the performance of the National Health Service based on the new funding that the Government has made available. And, of course, that funding is more significant in this coming financial year. And what we are doing, of course, is helping the National Health Service to recover from the impact of the COVID pandemic and the delays in treatment. And Mr Sarwar managed to breeze his way through that whole question without mentioning the impact of the global pandemic and its disruption to our healthcare services. On the question of schools, of course, we are seeing the levels of literacy and numeracy that have been recorded in our schools at much higher levels, and the attainment gap being at its narrowest in a number of the key aspects of literacy and numeracy assessment that are made. And on housing in Scotland, we have delivered more affordable housing per head of population by a significant margin compared to the developments in England, and very significantly compared to the situation in Wales. And of course, when I come to the question of Wales, I'm interested that today my counterpart in Wales, Eluned Morgan, the First Minister of Wales, has been setting out her vigorous disagreement with the direction of the United Kingdom government, the United Kingdom Labour government that's been elected, the last time people were faced with a choice of government. And of course, we've heard none of that from Mr Sarwar, because he has been right behind the UK government and its welfare cuts to some of the poorest in our country, right behind the UK government on no action on the WASPy women, right behind the UK government on the cuts to welfare, to winter fuel payments for pensioners in our country. So I think the people of Scotland will be able to look at the contrast between an SNP government that's delivering for the people of Scotland and a Labour government in the United Kingdom that's selling out the poor and the disadvantaged in our country and penalising pensioners. I think they'll choose the SNP.
Before we move to Lorna Slater, I would just say we're now at 10 minutes and we've only taken 2 members, so while brief questions would be appreciated, more concise responses too. I call Lorna Slater.
I'm delighted that the Government has finally committed to the Scottish Green policy of ending peak rail fares for good. Earlier this year, they said they wouldn't do it. They even voted against Green calls to do it, but we finally got there. More brave decisions are needed to make all public transport cheaper. The Scottish Government agreed to Green proposals for a £2 bus fare cap as a local pilot from January 2026. But people all across Scotland need cheaper buses now. Will the First Minister avoid the hesitation he showed over peak rail fares and get on with delivering another great Green idea, capping the price of bus fares all over Scotland for good?
First Minister.
I welcome the encouragement that I'm getting from Lorna Slater about the peak rail fares issue. The Government faced difficult financial choices at the time when we addressed this issue. We've got public finances into a stronger position, so we're able to afford that policy, and we'll be delighted to take it forward. And of course, it will make a big difference for travellers around the country. On the question of cheaper buses, the Transport Secretary is taking forward the pilot work that we agreed in the budget. We will, of course, look at its results with interest, and the financial support for under 22 and concessionary over 60s travel, and for disabled people as well, is a significant contribution to supporting bus travel in Scotland.
Well, it's Cole Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, the First Minister had barely drawn breath before referencing his ambition to create a vibrant economy. In this world of war and of tariffs, there is a heightened urgency and a heightened challenge to that ambition. He referenced, rightly, the key levers critical to fostering growth. Those are planning reform, skills development, housing and rural development. He isn't wrong, but his record on all of these should give us all pause. Does the First Minister accept that for nearly 20 years, his government has presided over a planning system which takes years to approve projects which in other parts of Europe would be green-lighted in weeks, that we aren't building enough affordable houses, which in turn makes it harder for us to recruit particularly key workers to remote and rural areas, and that thanks to his government's erosion of further education, we are in no position to generate the skills base we need to compete in the industries of the future like defence, renewables and AI.
First Minister.
President Officer, on the various questions, in terms of economic performance, GDP per person in Scotland has grown by 10.3% since 2007, when this government came to office, compared to 6.1% in the United Kingdom. So that's a demonstration the government's policies have supported and encouraged growth in the economy, and we obviously want to do more. On planning, Ivan McKee, the Planning Minister, has been taking forward a programme of planning reform to make sure that we are able to support developments where they are appropriate to do so. But I would counsel Mr Cole-Hamilton, because in the same breath he will also press us to make sure that we're applying stringent environmental standards to protect the natural environment. So we can't have it both ways on many of these questions. And then lastly, on the question of housing, as I indicated to Mr Sarwar, the Scottish Government has a record of building more affordable houses per head of population than any other part of the United Kingdom, while we've been dealing with the 14 years of austerity that were started under the Conservative government, or the Conservative and Liberal government in 2010. So the fact that we prioritised housing to build more affordable houses per head of population than in any other part of the United Kingdom is an indication of the commitment of the government. I'm delighted that Mr Cole-Hamilton and his colleagues were able to support us in our £768 million investment in the budget in affordable housing.
Michelle Thompson, to be followed by Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Now, I welcome the commitment to an industrial future for Grangemouth in my constituency, and of course for the £25 million pledged thus far. Carbon capture and storage is an important part of this industrial strategy, so I'm also therefore pleased that the Scottish Government is willing to increase the current commitment of £80 million for Acorn if it means the UK Government will approve this project. So will the First Minister join me in continuing to call for this essential project to be given the green light at pace, and ideally in the forthcoming UK Government spending review? First Minister.
It would be enormously beneficial if we were to get the green light, and it's not actually beneficial, it's essential that we get the green light. Forgive me, the word essential is the word I have to use to Michelle Thompson, that we get the green light for the Acorn project. There's a superb opportunity available for Scotland. The UK Government has supported 2 carbon capture projects in England. There is an undeniable case for the Acorn project, and the Scottish Government is willing to be a more significant funder if that project gets the go-ahead, and I encourage the Prime Minister and the United Kingdom to do so.
Craig Hoy, to be followed by Karen Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. SNP MSPs have been nodding slavishly behind the First Minister, but beyond the Holyrood bubble, people and businesses will be scratching their heads in disbelief at today's programme for government. This government has failed to deliver growth, imposed the highest taxes in the UK and has run down public services while failing on its own child poverty and net zero targets. And I agree with Nicola Sturgeon that the SNP's previous attempts to get the NHS off its knees were awful, but her scathing criticism surely applies to today's blueprint as well. So I ask John Swinney this: hasn't it come to something when the principal call for business is for John Swinney to do no more harm, and despite his plans, saying his plans will boost exports and attract investment, won't business see through his flimsy rhetoric of an innovation nation and see instead a high-tax, low-growth Scotland burdened by years of SNP over-regulation and narrow-minded nationalist dogma?
First Minister.
OK, let's take some of that apart. The growth record. So GDP per person in Scotland has grown by 10.3% since this government came to office, compared to 6.1% in the United Kingdom. So that demonstrates that we have been able to preside over a stronger economic performance in Scotland. Now, if that wasn't enough for Mr Hoy, we could bring things right close up to home. In 2024, Scotland's economy grew by 1.2%. Now, Mr Hoy might not think that's enough, but it was more than it was in the United Kingdom. When his, and I remind Mr Hoy, 2024 started when we had the completely useless and incompetent Conservative government in office, and they were delivering lower growth than we are delivering in Scotland. So I think Mr Hoy is going to have to change the script, because this government is delivering for the people of Scotland on the economy, on jobs, on investment, on securing new economic opportunities, and we're going to build on that record in the years to come.
Karen Adam, to be followed by Michael Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the expansion of specialist regional centres to deliver 150,000 additional appointments and procedures to reduce waiting times and waiting lists, and 100,000 extra appointments in GP surgeries focused on addressing the root causes of ill health. So can I ask the First Minister how the programme for government will build on the recent progress we've seen and ensure more people can see their GP and get the care that they need in their community?
First Minister.
Two specific measures will help in that respect. One is the expansion of the Pharmacy First services, which will provide ever more access to healthcare interventions for members of the public. And secondly, the additional capacity that's being created within GP services to make sure there are a range of appointments available to deal with core health conditions. And those two measures together will help to address many of the challenges that we face in accessing local healthcare services, which I recognise to be of vital importance to everyone in Scotland.
Michael Mara, to be followed by Emma Roddick.
We'll of course have to wait and see if anything actually happens, but it is welcome that after just the 18 years in charge of our NHS, John Swinney turned up in Dundee yesterday to say that the SNP now agreed with Labour policy that the ATM GP rush has to end. But who caused the problem in the first place? Could it be the SNP government that cut the number of GP surgeries by 25%? Could it be the SNP government that increased GP patient lists by 37%? If the SNP had a plan to save Scotland's NHS from their own incompetence, we would have seen it by now. Why should anyone believe that the people who broke our NHS can be the people to fix it?
First Minister.
For the very simple reason that the ministers in the Scottish Government today are addressing the issues of concern to the public, strengthening the NHS in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, and making sure that we've got the capacity in place to meet the needs of the public of Scotland. That's exactly what we've done in addressing the concerns of the public in Scotland and making sure there is more capacity and more opportunity for people to access healthcare services in Scotland. That's what the SNP government has delivered.
Emma Roddick, to be followed by Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The last few weeks have been extremely challenging for the LGBTQ+ community. The tally of bad news continued with the lack of an ending conversion practices bill. Can the First Minister set out plans in this programme for government to advance the rights of LGBTQ+ people and reassure the community that his government will do everything in its power to protect our rights?
First Minister.
President, I happily give that commitment to Emma Roddick, and I know that the last few weeks have been particularly challenging for members of the LGBTQ+ community. So I recognise that, and I want to assure Emma Roddick of the commitment of the government to address the concerns that have been expressed. I've set out in my statement the rationale for the steps that we're taking on ending conversion practices by collaborating with the UK Government, who has indicated they intend to take forward this agenda, and by making sure that we provide funding support to organisations that will work to promote equality within Scotland in the forthcoming financial year. And I give her the assurance that those commitments will lie at the heart of the programme for government.
Kerr, to be followed by George Adam.
The First Minister has recommitted this government to a just transition and an industrial future for Scotland. What impact will last year's £23.4 million cut to the net zero and energy budget have on achieving that?
First Minister.
Well, as Mr Kerr will be familiar, the government has to live within the resources that are available to it, and we've had to deal with a significant pressure in the last 2 financial years of hyperinflation arising out of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That has fuelled public sector pay deals to levels that were not conceived of when we were setting the government's budget. So there have been changes that we've had to make. What the government has done, of course, is put forward a budget which has now been supported by Parliament, not by Mr Kerr or the Conservatives, so I don't know quite why he's complaining about anything financially to me, because he wasn't willing to press the button to vote for the government's budget. He was just prepared. He's just prepared to sit over there, complain, not suggest any alternatives, and fail to support the delivery of finances to support our public services. That is a capitulation of responsibilities by a Member of Parliament.
George Adam, to be followed by Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Removing peak rail fares for September will greatly benefit my constituents in Paisley, considering we have one of the busiest train stations in Scotland. But since cost is a major barrier to shifting from car use to public transport, what steps has the First Minister outlined in his programme for government to help more people travel sustainably by bus or train?
First Minister.
President Officer, the steps that we are putting in place around peak rail fares, alongside the support to the bus sector, the support also to the active travel work that is underway within government, are three of the measures that I would cite to Mr Adam as being measures which have been taken to support the modal shift that is required to support our climate ambitions.
Pam Duncan-Glancy, to be followed by Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the First Minister for advance sight of the statement. The First Minister talks of the ABCs of education, so let me test his government's record on them. On attainment, more pupils than ever are leaving school with no qualifications, and the attainment gap in a variety of measures is growing. On absence, rates are up, and the government announces today that it will monitor the data. When families needed action, they got simply observation. On behaviour, violence is up and misogynistic abuse is growing, but instead of addressing staff workload or pupil needs, the government talks about a new action plan which hasn't even defined the problem yet. And on curriculum, after years of reviews, consultations and rebrands, subject choice is narrowing, vocational routes are under-resourced and reform has been delayed and diluted again. So can the First Minister tell us this? After 17 years of broken promises and a generation of young people's opportunities squandered in the process, will he now admit his government has failed on education?
First Minister.
No, I won't. Subject choice is very extensive in Scottish education, and I think Pam Duncan-Glancy does a disservice to the education system to suggest otherwise. On attainment, well,
Thank you, members. Let's hear one another.
It's factually accurate, Mr Maher, believe you me. On primary pupils' attainment, the gap in literacy in primary pupils, P1, 4 and 7 combined, is now its lowest level ever, at 20.2 percentage points, the lowest level ever. That debunks what Pam Duncan-Glancy is saying to me. When it comes to the behaviour interventions, the government is taking steps which have been consulted upon in Parliament to support the teaching profession in tackling unacceptable behaviour in our schools, and there are further steps been taken to support to address the absence issue from schools, which I recognise and the government accepts is unacceptable at the levels that it is currently at, because that deprives young people of their engagement in learning. And the Education Secretary is bringing forward measures to ensure that the attendance issue is addressed by the communication and the engagement that we have with the school communities in this respect. So I can assure Pam Duncan-Glancy that the government is taking forward every step we can to strengthen attendance and participation in education.
Fergus Ewing, to be followed by Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The recent blackouts in Spain and Portugal caused havoc to the vast majority of all the people in those countries, and the initial estimate of the cost of putting it right is around €4,000 million. They rely heavily, as we do, on renewables. The First Minister has ruled out nuclear. There is no coal. That just leaves gas. Does the First Minister accept that to provide stability for the national grid, it is necessary to provide baseload or backup, and the only option remaining on the table, First Minister, is gas? Will you support the new gas stations which are tremendously cleaner and more efficient than the old ones, and which can help protect us against the risk of blackout in Scotland and the UK.
Always through the Chair, please. First Minister.
President Officer, Mr Ewing raises an important point about the need for energy security and the need for baseload capacity. So I don't doubt the premise of the question that he puts to me. The issues can be addressed, however, in different ways. We can take forward steps in relation to long-duration energy storage technologies. We can take forward work in relation to pumped hydro storage. We can take forward steps in relation to battery storage as part of the renewables energy mix. What I would say to Mr Ewing, he asked me specifically about gas power stations. He will know there is a live planning application with ministers, so I will avoid commenting on that question. But I do think there's a wider solution to the issue, the important issue that Mr Ewing puts to me, which has to be addressed to deliver security and safety for the population in Scotland.
Jackie Dunbar, to be followed by Sue Webber.
Thank you, President Officer. I'm pleased to see the SNP Government continuing to focus on supporting folk with everyday costs through the cost of living package, through what continues to be a cost of living crisis for so many. Has the Government carried out any assessment of what the average household benefits from policies such as lower council tax and water bills than England and Wales have, along with other supports such as free tuition fees, childcare, bus travel, to name just a few?
First Minister.
In relation to some of the specific points that Jackie Dunbar raises with me, average council tax charges for Band D properties are £600 lower in Scotland compared to England and £400 lower than in Wales. In addition to that, our provisions on early learning and childcare would essentially represent a benefit of about £6,000 per child per year. And in relation to tuition fees, students in England pay £28,605 for tuition fees, when Scottish domiciled students have continued free university tuition. So I think those are some of the answers that Jackie Dunbar was looking for.
Sue Webber, to be followed by Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the programme for government outlines no timeline or plan to dual the A96, offers supposed milestones on dualling the A9, considering it was supposed to be finished this year, and contains no mention at all of other vital roads like the A75 or the A77. Does the First Minister accept that communities have been left in the dark over long-promised SNP upgrades to these vital roads, and can the First Minister guarantee that these upgrades will finally or even be delivered?
First Minister.
On the position in relation to the A9, for example, the programme for government reaffirms the timetable that's been shared with Parliament already, so there's no deviation from that timetable. Indeed, the Transport Secretary last week was up at the stretch of the A9 at Moy to Tomatin to see the start of the works there, and there will be further steps taken as in line with the timetable that has been shared with Parliament by the Transport Secretary for new sections to be put out to tender. Indeed, there's already a tendering exercise out on one of the other sections on the A9. In relation to the position on the A96, we remain absolutely committed to dualling the Inverness to Nairn section, including the Nairn bypass, and made orders were published on the 12th of March 2024 to deliver that particular road. So that progress is underway, and we will continue to keep Parliament informed of developments.
Audrey Nicholl, to be followed by Mark Griffin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister expand more about the 6-point export plan, which specific international markets will be targeted and through which export sectors, and how this package of measures will support Scottish companies to reach global markets at a time of particular economic uncertainty due to US tariffs?
Minister.
President Officer, Audrey Nicholl highlights an important issue around economic volatility, and part of what the Government is trying to do in the programme for government is to make it clear where we can take steps to support companies in navigating those examples of global volatility. We have a number of key markets which are represented by the areas where we have an international presence through Scottish Development International. We also have the benefit of the Global Scot network, which helps us to establish connections. And in terms of sectors, technology, life sciences, renewables and green hydrogen, premium food and drink and advanced manufacturing are all some of the key sectors that the Government will pursue.
Mark Griffin, to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. A year on from declaring a housing emergency, we still don't have enough homes. Building rates have fallen and over 10,000 children are homeless. The Government have failed to get us anywhere near the delivery of 110,000 affordable homes, and the 8,000 re-announced in the programme for government won't be enough to get that target back on track, which isn't a surprise given that the huge housing budget cut was only partially restored this year. But can I ask the First Minister, in line with pleas made by Shelter and Homes for Scotland, to pledge to build the homes we all need, or will the 110,000 affordable homes target become another broken promise?
First Minister.
I have to correct Mr Griffin, who's normally very accurate about this information, but the housing budget this year has more than compensated for the it's higher than it was in the previous year to the year in which we had to reduce the budget. So it's so that's what the Government is doing. We've remedied that particular issue. So I would just encourage the Labour Party to accept the facts and move on and find something else to talk about, find something else to moan about, given that we have addressed the issue about the budget that we've put in place. And the second
Let's hear one another.
And the second point I'd make to Mr Griffin, and I made this point to him at First Minister's Questions last week, and I'm surprised he hasn't taken account of this. In Scotland, we have delivered more affordable houses per head of population than in England or in Wales in the face of austerity, and the Government's programme will build on exactly that.
Kenneth Gibson, to be followed by Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland's prosperity depends on having a highly skilled workforce, enabling a globally competitive economy in sectors such as aerospace and life sciences. And providing more science, technology, engineering and maths skills was an issue raised by Colleges Scotland at the Finance and Public Administration Committee only this morning. Can the First Minister advise as to what steps his Government is taking to deliver the unfilled demand for 15,000 apprenticeship places that Open University says Scottish employers currently require?
First Minister.
President Officer, we are investing about £185 million each year, enabling 25,000 people in each year to undertake modern apprenticeships. We will continue to support around 38,500 apprentices already in training as part of our wider programme. The issue that Mr Gibson raises touches on the availability of an adequately sized working age population in Scotland. And that is a strategic challenge for Scotland, which is made worse because of the effect of the loss of free movement of individuals as a consequence of Brexit. So there are steps that could help us to strengthen the employment base of Scotland if we had a larger working age population who would be able to benefit from the training opportunities we can provide.
Miles Briggs, to be followed by Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In the education section of the programme for government, it states SNP ministers will be ensuring the removal of written exams in more practical subjects. So can I ask the First Minister two questions? How do ministers plan to deliver this change this year? And does this move away from our traditional rigorous Scottish exam system now present SNP exam policy? And does he accept the concerns this could further weaken our education system and confuse employers?
First Minister.
I think if Mr Briggs is saying that the only way that the performance of a student can be assessed is by a written examination, then I think that's what I take from Mr Briggs.
Let's hear the First Minister.
That's what I take from Mr Briggs's question, that he is. The emphasis in the programme for government about alternative methods of assessment are very common in our college and university community already, and they contribute significantly to the international reputation of Scotland. So there has to be high standards in our examination system. I don't think that only can be delivered by high-stakes exams. I think, in fact, some of the best assessment of performance can be made during an academic year. That's what happens in many of our universities and colleges, and I think the Education Secretary is making a sensible step of applying more of that in our school community.
Stuart McMillan, to be followed by John Mason.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am pleased the programme for government will include the non-surgical cosmetic bill, making the aesthetic sector safer for patients and practitioners, and, as the First Minister will be aware, something that one of my constituents has lobbied for quite some time. But can the First Minister indicate when he plans to introduce the bill into the Scottish Parliament?
First Minister.
President, we'll be introducing that in the remainder of the parliamentary session, with the objective of ensuring that legislation is complete by the end of this Parliament. I commend Mr Macmillan on the way in which he has pursued this issue, and I'm glad that we've found the legislative vehicle that will enable us to take that forward.
John Mason, to be followed by Rona Mackay.
Thank you. The First Minister said in his statement, "A fairer Scotland with Scotland's growing wealth shared more fairly." Can I ask, is he thinking of a more progressive council tax or a property tax, or perhaps a wealth tax?
First Minister.
We've got to... The point in principle is being applied in the government's approach to taxation. It's always underpinned our approach to taxation. And what I want to make sure is that we continue to take forward measures that support those who suffer from poverty, suffer in poverty, that we can assist them out of poverty, that we can create the opportunities for them to thrive. But of course we need well-financed public services to enable us to do so.
Rona Mackay, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My constituents in Strathkelvin and Bearsden benefit every day from the current cost of living guarantee of the SNP government that supports them and their families, support not available anywhere else in the UK. What plans are in the programme for government that will particularly provide further help for families and children?
First Minister.
President, we took steps in the budget to make provision for us to expand a number of areas that will be relevant here. The Bright Start Breakfast Fund is one example of that. The expansion of free school meals to around 25,000 more pupils in low-income households will be another. And of course, the steps that we are taking forward to address the issue, or the requirement to lift the two-child limit, will help to address some of the points that Rona Mackay has raised with me.
And Willie Rennie.
It is striking. It's the last signature government statement before the election next year, and the gallery is almost empty. But can I just say that whilst the share of health spending on GPs is down, weights are up. So why did it take the threat of a formal dispute from the doctors for the government to finally act?
Well,
First Minister.
I assure Mr Rennie that it didn't, because if Mr Rennie casts his mind back, the government has been engaged in dialogue with the GP community on these questions for some time. Indeed, I reflected in January in my speech at the Robotarium on exactly these issues that we were addressing, to make sure that we could improve access to healthcare, to GP services, and the government has delivered that as part of the programme for government today.
Thank you. That concludes the First Minister's statement. There will be a brief pause before we move on to the next item of business and to allow front benches to reorganise.
Thank you. The next item of business is a debate and programme for government 2025 to 26. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Kate Forbes, Deputy First Minister, to open the debate. Up to 11 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister has set out an ambitious and bold plan for delivery over the next 12 months. And as Deputy First Minister, I hold responsibility for cross-government delivery and outcomes. Each of the commitments that have been set out by the First Minister demonstrates that this is a government which believes in action, improving the lives of the people of Scotland today and tomorrow. And this government is delivering positive change and tangible benefits, policies that people can see and feel in their daily lives. My role is to ensure that that continues to be the case. But with stretched public finances, we can't do everything. Hard decisions must sometimes be made. And so we focus on what has the greatest and the most positive impact for the people of Scotland now, and how we invest for the future. This government has always been very clear on what's needed. The First Minister has set out his priorities. He set them out the day he accepted his position as leader of the nation, and he reiterated them today. They are eradicating child poverty so that no child in Scotland sees their opportunities curtailed. Secondly, growing a wellbeing economy to create new jobs and a fairer society. Thirdly, tackling the climate emergency to help nature heal and fight climate change while investing in a greener future for us all. And lastly and fourthly, providing high-quality and sustainable public services so that we're healthier and every community, whether urban or rural, can thrive. I would hope that these four objectives are objectives that every member can get behind in this chamber. And yet, from global conflict to shifts in global trade, not all challenges can be solved and controlled in Scotland. But we can ensure, collectively, that Scotland is ready and resilient. We can improve the lives of individuals, of families and communities with this programme for government. And we are already doing so. I will.
Jeremy Balfour. I'm grateful to the Deputy First Minister. Deputy First Minister, in last year's programme of government, there were a number of bills which were going to benefit the lives of disabled people. Those bills were all dropped over the last 12 months, and there's nothing within this programme of government specifically for disabled people. You talk about helping the most vulnerable. What within this programme of government will help disabled people who make up 20% of the population here in Scotland?
Always to the Chair, Deputy First Minister.
Well, I can assure the member that this government is absolutely committed to delivering for disabled people, and you will not find this government following in the same footsteps as the UK government, who have completely deserted disabled people. And I was just coming on, Presiding Officer, to some of the achievements of this government, not least investing £6.9 billion in a Scottish benefits system that prioritises dignity and fairness of every human being. And in our efforts to eradicate child poverty, we have successfully delivered the Scottish Child Payment. In tackling the climate crisis, we've halved Scotland's emissions between 1990 and 2022, while growing the economy by 67%. And we've created around 75% of all new woodlands in the UK. We've installed 6,000 public charge points for electric vehicles, 2 years ahead of schedule. And to grow the economy from 2023 to 2024 through investment in Scottish enterprise, we've helped businesses to unlock a record £1.89 billion of planned capital investment. That has created or safeguarded over 16,700 jobs, tangible outcomes that people are experiencing today because of decisions that this government has taken. In 2023, inward investment projects in Scotland grew by more than double the UK average. And for the 9th year running, Scotland remains the UK's top performing area outside of London and the South East for foreign direct investment. Investors believe in the potential that the Scottish economy has to offer. Over this Parliament to December 2024, we also supported the completion of almost 35,000 affordable homes, with over 26,000 for social rent. We've brought digital connectivity to some of the hardest to reach areas in Scotland, and we've not only delivered the 64,000 additional NHS appointments and procedures between April 2024 and the end of January 2025 that we promised, but 11,500 more than planned. Those achievements, and many more than can be listed in Chamber today, are the record of a government that is committed to action and has delivered for the people of Scotland. I'll take a number of interventions, starting with Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
To the Deputy First Minister. 2 budgets ago, the real terms cut in the economy budget was £8.3 And that was at the time where the forecasters were saying that the overall budget had gone up by 2.2%. Business complained at the time that that was doing nothing to enhance the skills agenda that we are desperately needing in Scotland for new jobs and for our new industries. Could the Deputy First Minister comment on that?
Deputy First Minister.
Incredibly proud of the work that our enterprise agencies and the Scottish National Investment Bank has done over the last 2 years. We aren't pretending that financial budgets are anything but challenging right across the UK. And what this government has done is to prioritise the areas of economic impact that will have the greatest potential to create jobs, to attract that inward investment. So if you look at the Scottish Enterprise results from last year, I referenced some of them just there, they are directly involved in creating jobs and ensuring that we attract inward investment. And those outcomes, in terms of being the highest performing area outside of London and the South East, I think demonstrates that we are investing in the right areas. This programme for government has been brought forward because of a number of challenges that we are grappling with. The first is the lingering effects of Brexit, 14 years of austerity and inflation. It's also conflicts across the world and an increasing number of adverse weather events brought on by climate change, and the turmoil of tariffs, of global trade wars and faltering economies. It's certain that we will see the effects of all this here at home. I'll make a bit more progress, and if I've got time, I'll bring in some others. The strain on the public purse and public services will continue. The strain on people's finances, the stress and uncertainty cannot be wished away. But this government is ready, it is resilient, and it will ensure that Scotland is ready and resilient too. And to that end, we are refocusing and redoubling our efforts. This programme for government sets out the concrete actions that will make our communities healthier, fairer, greener and more prosperous, that will make Scotland a better place to live, work, create and invest. Presiding Officer, as the Minister with responsibility for delivery and outcomes, my focus is on ensuring the government's work is aligned to create the greatest possible benefit for the people of Scotland. That's what the commitments in this programme for government all do. They are the actions that will make the biggest difference to improving people's lives. So in the coming year, we will develop the systems needed to effectively scrap the impact of the two-child cap. That will limit the impacts of a cruel UK government policy on families in Scotland and support them through the ongoing cost of living crisis. We'll continue with the Scottish Child Payment, which this year is expected to support around 330,000 children. We'll introduce a universal pension age winter heating payment from this winter, so that all pensioners are supported to heat their homes through the coldest months. And we'll support delivery of over 8,000 affordable homes for social rent, mid-market rent and low-cost home ownership. That will ease the housing crisis and provide people with significant relief from the largest of their greatest monthly expenses. I'm happy to take an intervention.
I thank the Minister for giving way. I've seen a reference to business rates in the programme for government. She, like me, will understand that business, particularly now that England is looking at creating a fairer business rate system, particularly for our high streets, now that Scottish business is calling out for similar measures here. Does the government intend to undertake a reform of business rates, particularly for retail, hospitality and leisure?
Well, I thank the member for the opportunity to clarify. So this government obviously introduced reforms to non-domestic rates a number of years ago based on an independent review. We are aware of what the UK government is planning to introduce, which we believe they are setting out will be self-financing. So it has consequences for Scotland because the business base is different. There are just larger businesses in England to self-finance. But what we have announced today is, in recognition of the ongoing concerns raised by the licensed hospitality sector on the valuation methodology applied to non-domestic rate properties, we'll commission an independent review to report by the end of next year and consider any recommendations. So that will be independent and is entirely in line with what has been requested by the hospitality sector. Presiding Officer, with the minute I have left, we will also introduce a heat and buildings bill to set targets. We'll work with the UK Government to reform the consenting process through the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. Subject to the approval of the Housing Bill, we'll begin work to improve outcomes for those at risk of homelessness and strengthen tenants' rights. We'll see to it that more people can see their GP and receive care in the community. We'll invest up to £200 million in the Scottish Attainment Challenge programme. We'll establish Invest Scotland, which I'm particularly pleased about, to showcase Scottish investment opportunities to global investors. We'll support entrepreneurship by creating a £2.9 million proof of concept fund. We'll invest £150 million to support private investment in supply chain clusters for offshore wind, and all of that will lead to more thriving businesses and more high-quality employment for people living in Scotland. And so, Presiding Officer, with these actions and more, we will deliver the greatest possible impacts for Scotland, tangible benefits that people will feel in their daily lives. And I look forward to hearing the debate over the course of this afternoon.
Thank you, Deputy First Minister. I now call on Rachel Hamilton to open on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Today's programme for government is more of the same from the SNP. For 18 years, they've broken promises, let people down and failed to deliver for the people of Scotland. John Swinney's government just looks like a Nicola Sturgeon government or a Humza Yousaf government. Old dogs can't learn new tricks, and John Swinney has spent 2 decades around the cabinet table. He's not doing anything new here, nothing that we've not heard before, just another series of SNP pledges not worth the paper they've written on. And yet another paper on chasing the Loch Ness Monster, a proposal on independence, gathering dust with the other 13 papers that he's already published. Today's statement includes some commitments we would welcome if we thought they would ever be delivered, but they won't be. The goal to reduce child poverty is a laudable one, but the SNP regularly make these big pledges with no clue how they happen. Yes.
Deputy First Minister.
I just wonder who the member thinks is responsible for Scotland having the lower unemployment rate than the rest of the UK, and the only part of the UK to see child poverty fall.
Rachel Hamilton.
Well, Kate Forbes is in charge of the economy. She'll know that the Conservative government brought the UK to one of the fastest growing countries in the G7. I'm surprised she doesn't know that, Presiding Officer. The programme for government speaks of reducing NHS waiting lists, but with no clear and credible plan to do so. It speaks a lot about the economy, but it's lacking any tangible new ideas or proposals to deliver that growth that we desperately need. It's a document that doesn't live up to its ambitions. After 18 years in power, this SNP government is out of ideas, out of energy and out of touch with mainstream Scotland. What most people want to see was a focus on the bread and butter issues that really affect their lives, their daily concerns, hopes and needs. Not the usual nonsense from the SNP, but a common sense approach to improving their lives. We believe they wanted to see a laser-like focus on 4 key issues. The SNP should have made this programme for government about bringing down bills, faster GP appointments, fixing the roads, raising school standards, delivering better value for money. And my colleagues will talk about that later in today's debate. Those are the top issues that matter most to people in the real world. By not focusing on those issues year after year, the Scottish Parliament has left voters across Scotland feeling that politicians are disconnected and detached from reality. I'm sure the SNP will claim they are focusing on people's priorities, but the evidence shows they're not. They never deliver. You just have to look at the public services and our economy to see that. If they were delivering, waiting lists would be lower, schools would be providing brilliant opportunities for all of our children, potholes would be fixed, and good jobs would be available all across the country. But anyone just has to look outside their door, along the streets where they live, just to see that that is not the case. The SNP way has failed. It's not working. And on the basis of today's statement, it never will, because it's just, as I said, more of the same. So my party is setting out an alternative to the left-wing consensus of the SNP, Labour, Greens and Liberal Democrats. We're putting together a different way of doing things to deliver the change that Scotland desperately needs. Positive, common sense, Conservative policies that would improve people's lives. First, bills need to be brought down so people can control more of their hard-earned money and how it is spent. Scotland is the highest part of the United Kingdom. Workers pay more to do the same job as people south of the border, whilst businesses pay sky-high rates and a litany of other taxes. Of course.
John Mason.
I thank the member for giving way. I mean, she only looks at the UK taxes. Would she accept that Britain and Scotland are low-tax economies compared to many countries in Europe?
Rachel Hamilton.
Well, John Swinney has imposed the highest record tax burden on Scots, and that is costing Scots £1.7 billion, John Mason. Presiding Officer, I'm not quite sure if the First Minister wants to intervene.
I wasn't aware that the First Minister had sought an intervention.
OK. Well, bills must be brought down. First Minister, bills must be brought down, First Minister. And families need a break. Family needs a break from paying more of this burden of tax that you've put onto them. The problem with paying more is getting less.
Always through the chair, Ms Hamilton.
Thank you. The problem with paying more and getting less, of course, is not just about higher bills. Yeah, why not?
Patrick Harvey.
I'm grateful. The member is very keen that people's bills should be brought down and they shouldn't pay more and get less. Does she accept that private rented sector tenants in Scotland are paying more for their homes than they would if they had a mortgage? They're paying more, they're getting less, and so will she support the proposal for rent controls?
Rachel Hamilton.
I will absolutely 100% not support the proposals that the Green and the SNP are pushing with rent controls, because it's going to stifle the housing market. It's going to drive people out, and it's not going to deal with the housing crisis, and Patrick Harvey knows that. Every year, the SNP grandstands that they are throwing more money at the NHS, but waiting lists remain too long. The government must bring forward a detailed plan for faster GP appointments. It can be done by removing bureaucracy, using technology to streamline the process, and by investing more directly in the front line. Our roads too are in desperate need of investment. Fixing the roads has not been a priority for the SNP since they turned against motorists. They decided that the way to meet net zero targets is to punish car drivers, make them pay more, when really better roads would help the environment. It would mean cars can travel more quickly and easily without emitting as much CO2. It would mean fewer costly repairs. And in rural areas like mine, there are often no other options other than to drive because public transport is so bad. Fixing the roads should become a focus of this government again. And so should raising standards in schools, because under the SNP's watch, they have fallen. When John Swinney was Education Secretary, our schools plummeted down the international league tables, and now violence in schools has spiralled out of control. Gender ideology and well-being takes up too much time that should be spent on traditional learning. The government must restore education standards by taking a tougher approach on bad behaviour, bringing back the focus on the knowledge in the curriculum and investing in teaching posts. Finally, but most importantly, the government needs to get smarter on spending taxpayers' money. Providing value for money is essential to restoring trust with the public, who feel Holyrood just doesn't get their concerns. When people pay more, as I say, they're getting less year after year. They think their politicians are at it, and this must change. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, this programme for government is more of the same from the SNP. It's a John Swinney special. Big promises with no plan of how to meet them. In a year's time, we'll look back on this in the same way as we look back at all the other previous SNP statements. All this will achieve is more broken promises, more failed pledges, more lack of trust in the government and their ability to deliver change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hamilton. I now call on Jackie Bailey to open on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Presiding Officer, so many broken promises, so many wasted years, so many Scots let down. That is the legacy of this SNP government, and it's a legacy that is wholly owned by John Swinney. The First Minister has been at the heart of this SNP government for almost 18 years. As Finance Secretary, he cut budgets for GPs and clawed back money from health and social care partnerships, who face a deficit of £560 million. As Education Secretary, Secretary, he downgraded the results of 125,000 working-class kids and failed to increase teacher numbers by 3,500. Instead, teacher numbers are down. The SNP think that they can cut a budget, partially restore it, and then ask us to applaud them for it. But the public are not fooled. Now, we have a recycled, rebadged programme for government with nothing new, no vision, and absolutely no guarantee of delivery. And that really is the key. Because they've had 18 years to deliver, and they've singularly failed to do so. At the right hand of two First Ministers, Alex Salmond and then Nicola Sturgeon, John Swinney was trusted to run government, to be the keeper of their secrets, and oh, how he protected them, whatever the cost. But John Swinney has demonstrated, I think, in this year, that he's simply not up to the job, and he's run out of ideas. So much so, in fact, that the SNP has now taken to plagiarising Scottish Labour's plans to end 8 a.m. waits for GP appointments and to scrap peak time fares. Now, I'm delighted as well with the news about the joint education and NHS facility in Barra. Of course, it follows my visit there with Donald McKinnon, Scottish Labour's candidate, and I have to say, he is already...
Ms Bailey, please resume your seat a second. I don't know if Ms Bailey was in the chamber last week when I had to mention this to another colleague in the chamber, that we are in a parliament, we're not part of a hustings. So please proceed accordingly.
Indeed, but I was simply going to make the comment that there we have a candidate visiting Barra alongside myself, and before he is even elected, we appear to have delivered. I am going to Caithness next to talk to maternity campaigners, and perhaps the government would like to restore maternity services there too. Now, as a former Education Secretary, John Swinney should know better than to steal someone else's homework. But that's what it's come to, because this government has run out of ideas, and nowhere is that clearer than in Scotland's NHS. And what is the SNP's record? Well, NHS waiting times are up, with 800,000 Scots on an NHS waiting list. Thousands stuck in hospital beds as they wait for social care packages. Patients struggling to get appointments with their GPs, whilst the GPs themselves are threatening to go on strike. And last month, the SNP published yet another NHS recovery plan. 5 plans in just 4 years. Presiding officer, they don't know what they're doing, and we have the WhatsApp messages to prove it. Only last weekend, we learned that days before its publication, former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon described one of the many NHS recovery plans as awful. For once, I agree with her. And after 18 years in charge of our NHS, there's no one else left to blame. It's entirely the responsibility of the SNP. And the SNP promised to recruit 800 more GPs by 2027. That's not going to be delivered, and in fact the number of GPs has actually fallen. The Royal College of Nursing today, in a report, says that there are not enough nurses to provide safe staffing levels. The SNP promised to reduce waiting times, yet the peak of the SNP's ambition appears to be that by March 2026, patients will be only waiting a year for treatment. Far be it for me to point out that the treatment time guarantee is supposed to be 12 weeks. Now, the SNP promised to create an NHS app in 2021. I look forward to it. 4 years on, that's been downgraded to a pilot in NHS Lanarkshire. Now, the First Minister says we'll have a renewed focus on cancer. Well, not before time, as his SNP government has failed to meet the 31 and 62-day treatment targets in the latter case for 13 years. First Minister has re-announced £5 million for hospices. That's great, but they've yet to see a single penny. No timeline, no delivery by the SNP yet again. He boasts about CAM's targets being met, but that's because the figures have been fiddled and children with ADHD and autism have been removed. The Royal College of Psychiatrists point out that the SNP promised to invest 10% of frontline NHS budget in mental health, but it's only 8%. Meanwhile, GP funding has fallen from 11% of the health budget to 6.5%. The SNP are showing us what they actually value, and it's not the NHS, nor is it social care. But you know, that's the point. That's the point.
Ms Bailey is about to conclude.
There is no good idea that actually survives the SNP. They've been in power for 18 years. If they had a good idea, they would have used it by now. But they don't, because this is the SNP. They fail to deliver, but they always succeed in wasting our money. I hope this is the last programme for government delivered by John Swinney. And I tell you, presiding officer, I am not the only one, because Scotland has had enough of this SNP government. It's time for change.
Thank you, Ms Bailey. I now call on Patrick Harvey to open on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, presiding officer. I do like to begin my contribution to these debates with one positive point, so let me welcome the fact that peak rail fares are gone for good. The Greens abolished them. The SNP brought them back. We criticised that decision, and the SNP derided our criticism, not just on financial grounds, but pretending the policy hadn't worked. Now peak fares are finally gone for good. Well, I'm glad the SNP have finally accepted that the Greens were right on this issue. But the thing is, it's consistent low fares that people really need if they're going to change their behaviour, not this kind of chopping and changing. And as for the rest of climate policy, the Heating Buildings Bill has been gutted. The target to reduce car traffic has been dropped with no alternative put in its place. Rail decarbonisation delayed, and no serious progress on reducing emissions from agriculture. Presiding officer, we've seen years of inaction on anything other than green electricity production, and that's what left the 2030 target out of reach. Now, the Scottish Government seems determined to abandon any serious policy ambition on the actions that are necessary to make this year's climate plan remotely credible. On child poverty, we all, I think, should recognise that the Scottish Child Payment is one of the most important and successful policies of the devolution era. But it was only possible because the money was raised. Those of us who had made the case for progressive tax for years won that argument and forced the SNP to drop its no-change tax policy. Well, that link remains. We can only invest if we raise the funds. And in a profoundly unequal society, the funds are there to be found. The First Minister, though, is now saying that the Scottish Child Payment is at its limit. And worse, he's actually echoing right-wing rhetoric about not giving people too much in case they lose the incentive to work. That's an age-old story. To give wealthy people an incentive to work, to do anything, they have to be given vast salaries, bonuses and tax havens. But for people in poverty to have an incentive to work, they must be kept poor. If there's time in hand, presiding officer.
There's very limited time, but First Minister.
I want to challenge Patrick Harvey's disgusting characterisation of my comments, because I want to make sure that people are supported out of poverty, but I want to enable people to have the ability to access employment. And the characterisation that Mr Harvey has attached to that is not worthy of him today in Parliament.
Patrick Harvey.
Well, the comments that I read from the First Minister's interview did say that he was worried that if the child payment was higher, it would reduce the incentive to work. Just like child poverty, the Scottish Government's wider goal of investing in public services links directly to a new challenge, and one challenge that the First Minister has chosen to accept personally by hosting a summit, the challenge of how to tackle the rise of the far right. Too many centrist politicians around the world think that to defeat the far right we have to copy them, and that's failed time and time again. We can't afford to repeat that. I would like to hope, and I do hope, that the Scottish Government would not go down that route if immigration was under its control. But on social policy, I fear that they are beginning to follow this playbook by abandoning progressive policies that once had the support of every single party in this Parliament. The SNP are now showing themselves to be as much of a threat to the LGBTQ communities as the Conservatives and Labour. And as Helena Kennedy said about the scrapping of the misogyny bill, she said, "We are seeing a retreat from some of those areas that are being characterised as woke." This is not the way. No, we need to change the conditions of our society that give the far right their opportunity to manipulate people and spread their message. There were many participants at the First Minister's Summit who challenged us all to invest in the public services, the housing, the conditions in local communities, which need to change if we're going to address the real and justified alienation which dangerous forces are exploiting. And it was made very clear by repeated comments at that meeting that building a fairer society that recovers from 15 years of austerity can only be done if we continue to raise fairly the resources that are needed, whether that's through local tax reform or through a wealth tax. And on that, Presiding Officer, I'm sorry to say that today's managerial SNP government seems to be terrified of anything that looks like the bold, ambitious change that our country needs.
Thank you, Mr Harvey. I now call on Alex Cole-Hamilton to open on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I am pleased to speak for the Liberal Democrats on today's programme for government. I do reflect on Willie Rennie's remarks that this chamber is almost empty. This is the pre-election giveaway announcement, and it should, I think, be carrying a lot more favour than it seems to be. Presiding Officer, before politics, I've said many times I was a youth worker. That's why I'm here. I was working closely with children who lived in absolute poverty. I saw firsthand the huge impact that deprivation can have on young lives and how it is often, too often, defining their futures. And that so many children are being born into poverty here in 2025 is a national embarrassment. The SNP have had 18 years to get this right, but we are still nowhere. And the fundamental way we get kids out of poverty is by growing Scotland's economy, Presiding Officer.
First Minister.
I wonder if Mr Cole-Hamilton thinks that the challenge for the SNP government was made easier or harder by the support of his party for the austerity of the Conservative government in 2010 and 2015.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
I'm grateful for the First Minister's intervention, but we're talking 15 years ago. You can't blame events of 15 years for what we're seeing today, for the mismanagement, the failure to grow the economy. And that is how we fix this, Presiding Officer. And the world is changing. Everything we took for granted now feels uncertain. And the free global economy is being replaced by punishing tariffs. Prices are soaring for everyday essentials, energy and raw materials that build our homes and fuel our economy. And at the same time, the quality of these services people rely on most is under real pressure because these services are directly tied to how our economy performs. Fast access to your GP, a good education for your child, high quality care for our loved ones, safe streets, reliable transport, well-maintained roads. Without economic growth, local services decline, investment stalls, opportunities dry up. And for the Scottish Liberal Democrats, building a stronger economy boils down to the key levers I referenced in my question. That is boosting our skills base, reforming planning, tackling the housing crisis and rural development. Without skilled, homegrown Scottish workforce ready for the industries of the future, like defence, renewables, AI, precision medicine, Scotland risks being left behind, and those jobs going overseas. Over the past 2 decades, this SNP government has presided over the quiet death of further education and reduced our ability to produce the skilled workforce that Scotland needs. We need to reverse that decline, and fast. Scotland is also actively driving away investment from a planning regime that is ridiculously slow. In parts of Scandinavia, planning takes about 7 weeks from application to shovels in the ground. Here, planning applications are measured out in years. A faster, simpler process, which still gives communities their place, would attract investment. Finally, housing is inseparable from skills. We can't offer affordable homes, especially to key workers, then we won't build the skilled workforces that Scotland urgently needs where we need them. Mental health must also be part of this conversation. The crisis in mental health is one of the reasons so many people are economically inactive or unable to return to their careers. Yet the government has broken its commitment to allocate 10% of funding to mental health and 1% to CAMHS. There is a workforce crisis here too, and a serious lack of provision for neurodevelopment developmental conditions, and a fundamental failure to help tens of thousands of Scots still suffering long COVID back to work. Presiding Officer, people are tired of feeling like things are getting steadily worse, with little or no clear plan for how to improve them. They are demanding that we do things differently. We need change that is backed and has to be backed by good, competent delivery, because people across Scotland see the consequences of delay and of drift every day. They've waited years for action on crumbling roads, on overstretched public services. In the Highlands, some communities still waiting for the A9, the A96 to be made safe, a promise that was made first 2 decades ago. There are other key areas where the government must act now, but I am running out of time. And we need a serious industrial strategy as well to underpin all of this, not just to attract new jobs, but to make sure they stay here in Scotland. Presiding Officer, this country has so much potential. It needs a government willing to match that ambition of its people who live here. After almost 20 years, this government has been found wanting, and it is time for them to get out of the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cole-Hamilton. We will now move to the open debate. I would advise the backbenchers that they have up to 4 minutes. There is no time in hand, and if they wish to accept interventions, that must be absorbed within their agreed allocated speaking time. With that, I call Emma Roddick, to be followed by Tim Eagle. Ms Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It can be very easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom of politics, especially given the current international situation. But as easy as it is to get frustrated with what's not happening, we do have to remember what is happening and what has happened. And there's a lot that SNP MSPs can feel proud of in this place. The Best Start grants, Scottish Child Payment and Baby Box are all working to tackle child poverty and ensure that every baby and parent in Scotland has the essentials that they need. Free prescriptions, eye appointments and dental care for certain groups mean that people do not have to choose between paying their bills and taking care of their basic health. And movements this session on getting on top of the out-of-control second home and short-term let properties in many areas, including a lot that I represent in the Highlands and Islands, has been incredibly positive and already not just provided some extra revenue for local authorities, but also encouraged these properties to be returned to the housing market. There is work to be done to convince people of the merit in doing things the right way, and not resorting to reactionary rhetoric, blame culture or monstering of minority groups, but delivering, alongside a positive message, public services which benefit everyone in Scotland. And it's important that we practice what we preach. We can't one day criticise the rise of the far right and then the next allow that same group to dictate our principles and policy as UK Labour is. They position themselves as an alternative to the Conservatives, but are now adopting right-wing policies, sharing negative lines on migration and turning their backs on the most marginalised by taking money out of the household budgets of disabled people and pensioners. Now, we cannot afford to let Nigel Farage and his campaigns of disinformation and despair win in Scotland. I can understand people feeling helpless, feeling like something radical is needed to shake up politics and redirect power in favour of ordinary people, but we have to be very clear that the route to that is independence. 15 years of Tory government initiated by the Lib Dems wrecked our economy, increased poverty and harmed countless people. It brought us Brexit, depopulation and a raft of policy which was aimed at doing nothing but discrediting and diminishing devolved parliaments. UK Labour got in last year and disappointed us again, picking up on the dehumanising brutal cuts and reforms to disability benefits that was started by the Conservatives, breaking almost as many promises as they managed to make in the election campaign. Farage is no friend to Scotland either. A far-right government will serve nobody but the people temporarily around their boardroom table. We cannot win with Westminster. Now, I am sad not to see a conversion practices ban in the programme, and I hope to see progress made on that over the next year. Because in my time as Equalities Minister, I met not only with survivors but providers of such practices who were determined to be allowed to continue. And it's painful to think of them out there now, causing more of the harm that was described to the Equalities Committee. I know that we can do better, and I am proud of the progress that we've made. But there's more to do, after independence and before, to become the successful, fair, socially just country of the vision that brought me into politics in 2014. To prove that we can do better, we really need to do better where we can now. Keep our promises and show everyone in Scotland that it is possible to deliver on priorities without excluding any group in society, be it disabled people, LGBTQ+ people, or those living out with the Central Belt. We must deliver infrastructure projects in the north and the south, acknowledge and meet the need for greater financial support for households with a disabled person, and ensure that islanders or rural residents have the same healthcare outcomes as someone in the middle of the city. It is that kind of action that will convince people that we can do more than mitigate. We can eradicate poverty and demonstrate that an independent Scotland is a better Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Roddy. I now call Tim Eagle to be followed by Kevin Stewart. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I just notify members, remind members of my register of interest as a small farmer? It's a little over a year since I entered this Parliament, and I have heard a lot of grandstanding from two First Ministers and their colleagues about their record in government. Yet despite their cries of success, I see so much of deep concern in our public services in Scotland. Now, just this week, we had another headline in the Scottish Farmer as beef sector organisations launched a stinging attack on the Scottish Government over a lack of any meaningful intervention and policy direction to support the national beef herd. It's one of a series of headlines that provide a damning indictment on this government's approach and attitude to farming, crofting, fisheries and the wider rural sector. The Rural Affairs portfolio was the only budget that saw a real terms cut in the last Scottish budget. 100 million of money earmarked for rural homes was redirected to build homes in Edinburgh and Aberdeen. The new ferries earmarked for Islay have faced fresh delays, and the cost for the two vessels at the Ferguson Marine Shipyard continue to spiral out of control. All the while, rural communities suffer with increasing ferry breakdowns and cancellations. Rural roads remain a major issue, where today a brilliant piece in the Herald has eviscerated this government's abysmal failure to deliver a long-term solution to the A83 rest and be thankful. Let's just be honest, roads like the A83 and the A96 will never be delivered under an SNP government. And on rural healthcare, residents across rural Scotland continue to face challenges accessing health and social care services, whether that is in Dunoon and Campbelltown, where residents are unable to register for a dentist on the NHS, the island of Barra, where plans for a new hospital have been paused indefinitely, or at Dr Gray's in Elgin, where local people have had to campaign just to get basic services. Happy to take an interview.
Deputy First Minister.
I wonder if you would join me in welcoming the two new hospitals that have been delivered are open right now in Skye and Aviemore.
Tim Eagle.
Delighted to welcome them, but what about the other ones? What about all the people who still can't access the services they need in rural communities across Scotland? These are the ones that really matter. You can't just do some, but others. I probably do need to make a wee bit of progress, I'm sorry. The SNP promised to deliver a crofting bill this year, but yet despite it being spoken about in 2016, they failed to publish a bill. The SNP pledged 25 million to provide new homes for key workers in rural and island communities. Instead, they delivered just 17 homes. Failure after failure after failure on policies for rural communities across Scotland. Is that happy to take the intervention from Jim Fairley?
Jim Fairley.
A couple of points I'd like to make to the member. First of all, there's a crofting bill on its way. It's being drafted as we speak. And secondly, it was the Tory government who introduced a policy that absolutely crashed the farming community down in England, while we continued direct support here in Scotland. And we have a stable industry in Scotland, while the English one absolutely fell apart.
Mr Eagle's got the gist. Mr Eagle, you've got up to 4 minutes.
I'm going to very quickly run out of time. I don't know if I'll be able to come back from that, but you haven't delivered anything for agriculture in Scotland. That's the fundamental problem, isn't it? The First Minister is talking a lot. I haven't got time, I'm afraid. I haven't got time. The First Minister is talking a lot today about the rural support,
his last minute.
The rural support plan that is still yet to come. We've been waiting over a year for it. They speak about the world-leading Scottish fishing sector, yet it was the Scottish Conservatives that brought the actual debate on that after 2 years of waiting from this government. They talk about new entrants vital to farming, but yet they haven't delivered anything for 15 years for new entrants in farming. If I believed the SNP had done something positive, I'd like to think I could say it, but they haven't. The SNP want to focus on fringe issues that rip Scotland apart, but the Scottish Conservatives want to focus on a new vision for Scotland, one of common sense, of shared values, bringing down bills, raising standards and delivering better value for money. That would be a programme for government that would deliver for rural Scotland. Today is yet, and you're still hearing it now, more rhetoric, nothing new from an out-of-touch, out-of-ideas and out-of-time government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eagle. I now call Kevin Stewart to be followed by Sarah Boyack. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Mr Eagle mentioned fringe issues there. I'll not be mentioning any of those today because I don't have a fringe. This programme for government is laser focused on delivering for the people of Scotland in our mission to build a healthier, wealthier and fairer country. And this programme is anchored around the clear objectives of eradicating child poverty, stimulating economic growth, improving our public services and delivering a just transition to net zero. And I want to focus on some of these areas. 4 minutes is not long, but in terms of child poverty. The Scottish Child Payment now supports over 326,000 children, with over £1 billion put directly into the hands of families since 2021. And now the Scottish Government has committed to go further by lifting another 15,000 children out of poverty in 2026 by mitigating the impact of Westminster's two-child limit in Scotland. If only the Westminster Government did the right thing and abolished that two-child limit at source at a Westminster level. The cost of living is obviously a real worry for many households throughout our country. And I'm very pleased to see today that has been taken cognizance of with the peak rail fares scrapped for good scheme and with the government's pledge to reintroduce the winter fuel payment. And I won't list all of the other benefits that the First Minister told us about today that people in Scotland get that those south of the border do not. But in order to pay for some of these things, we have to have an economy that works. And I'd like to pay tribute to the Government for looking at this very closely, for coming up with that 6-point export plan, for the Proof of Concept Fund, and for the Just Transition monies to create that green industrial future. The First Minister was right. We need the Acorn carbon capture project. I'm pleased that the Scottish Government puts its money where its mouth is, and it's time for Ed Miliband to do exactly the same and provide the resourcing for Acorn. I'm also very pleased to see £10 million of funding for the advancement of hydrogen technologies, which are our future. Finally, Presiding Officer, I'll turn to the NHS, because the NHS is one of the most important things for our citizens. And I welcome the commitment to tackle the AAM lottery and increase capacity by 100,000 additional GP appointments. That will be welcomed right across our country. Presiding Officer, this is a milestone, this programme for government, and what it will do is move us forwards to creating that healthier, wealthier and fairer Scotland, fairer for all. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Sarah Boyack to be followed by Audrey Nicholl. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I start by drawing members' attention to my register of interest? The SNP has now been in power for 18 years and my constituents are being failed every day, whether it's failures in the NHS, the deepening housing emergency in Edinburgh, and it was unacceptable that the First Minister was in complete denial about the housing emergency when we've got 10,000 children homeless, as Mark Griffin pointed out. We're also seeing a lack of action in the climate emergency, where we've got the need for more investment to support the fire and rescue service, tackle forest fires, to support people to make their homes energy efficient and affordable, with the lack of support for solar panels, the not fixing the incredibly complicated process to enable people to get new heating options, and the ongoing lack of action to affordable heat networks. These failures are bad for people's health and well-being. They're repeated failures to tackle the climate emergency, and it means we're missing out on the thousands of green jobs we could see created right across our communities. And in the Lothians, we've got particular problems. Jackie Baillie made a powerful speech about the Scottish Government's failures on the NHS, but in the Lothians, we've got 84% of Scotland's population growth over the next 5 years. Our NHS Lothian and councils are underfunded, and IGB cuts now are meaning that essential services that keep people well and healthy are under threat. I raised the issue in orals last week. I got a disappointing answer from the Minister. Our councils provided core funding for third sector groups, but we are now seeing really important services under threat, with £100 million worth of reduced services in the last 3 years, partly through underfunding, partly because of unfunded increases in demand. And these services are not nice to have, they are essential to keep people well and healthy. Yesterday I visited the Sam H. Redhall Walled Garden, a therapeutic horticultural project for people struggling with mental health problems. It's now at risk of closure because their contract is planned to be scrapped due to cuts in government funding. That leaves highly vulnerable constituents with nowhere to turn, some on waiting lists for referrals for well over a year, but it will cost us all because people's mental health deteriorates. They're not able to work. So I call on the Health Secretary to acknowledge these challenges, commit to working with NHS Lothian and Edinburgh Council so that these essential services that people rely on are not lost. We are not seeing the invest in prevention approach highlighted by the Christie Commission, and we're not getting the joined-up thinking our constituents urgently deserve. It's really motivating my members' bill on sustainable development and wellbeing, but it's more than public health. It's also about the climate emergency. Now, failure to act has left Scotland repeatedly missing our climate targets. The heating building disruption has meant supply chains, lack of confidence for those that could be recruiting and expanding, investing in infrastructure to deliver the jobs right across Scotland which our communities urgently need. Now, the First Minister highlighted Grangemouth, but as we argued last week, people knew for years that action was needed to save the jobs in that refinery, learn lessons from other countries and deliver the jobs that are now highlighted in the Willow Review. I will briefly, yes.
Concluding.
I'll let you go. Sorry?
The member is concluding. You have 4 minutes.
Okay. So I welcome the action on the Labour's call for abolition of peak rail fares, but we need joined-up transport planning and delivery for trains and buses. We're not getting that. If we don't get that, new homes in places like Winchborough should have had a railway station. We're not getting the action people urgently need, and that's after 18 years of failure. It's simply not good enough.
Thank you. I now call Audrey Nicholl to be followed by Douglas Lumsden. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Nicholl.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The ambitious but focused scope of today's programme for government is very welcome, given that yet again it is drawn together in the most difficult of times as the UK Government chooses an austerity agenda that continues to limit Scottish Government actions and the fiscal context in which it operates. And as the UK Labour Government continues to embrace the folly of Brexit, I welcome this programme, which centres on economic growth, tackling child poverty, improving public services and delivering on net zero. The climate crisis is very real. Now, Scotland hosts an abundance of small and medium-sized businesses, including in the energy space. They support well-paid jobs and have a fundamental role in the well-being of communities. The renewed focus by the Scottish Government on the economy over the last year or so has been very welcomed across the energy industry, and so the current challenging global environment for trade, not least of all from US tariffs, makes it all the more important that our domestic policy gets it right for our businesses. The decision of the UK Government to increase employer national insurance contributions has increased the tax burden on businesses with a disproportionate and hugely damaging effect on the most labour-intensive sectors. So I welcome the First Minister's update on supporting our food and drink sector and the development of a new 6-point export plan to support exporters diversify and grow their markets. And fundamental to the success of our businesses is a skilled workforce. Now, in the energy transition ecosystem, long-term sustainability of our workforce is crucial so that we can secure investor confidence and continue developing the next generation clean energy technology that is already globally recognised and already delivering on many of the Scottish Government's policy priorities. PwC's latest latest Green Jobs Barometer shows that Scotland has the highest proportion of green job adverts in all UK nations and regions, with the size of the green jobs market in Scotland tripling since 2021. And the North East is already home to an incredible range of start-ups and technologies that have been successfully commercialised. I know there is an appetite to tie in a new accelerator programme in the North East to the National Strategy for Economic Transformation. So I gently put that on the Deputy First Minister's radar as part of the programme for government going forward. The skills of our existing talented oil and gas workforce are so transferable and mobile that it's crucial that we harness them here in Scotland so that we can scale up our offshore wind sector. So I very much welcome the creation of a new £2.9 million proof of concept fund to support the commercialisation of research projects with significant economic potential, and an improved ecosystem fund to support the start-up environment. This is highly relevant to the North East and wider Scottish economy. So, Presiding Officer, to conclude, I particularly welcome the removal of peak fares. This is an excellent announcement, and this afternoon's debate on increased Scottish Government funding, should the ACORN project get the go-ahead, and I join Government, business leaders and colleagues in calling on the UK Government to support ACORN without delay. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Douglas Lumsden to be followed by Martin Whitfield, up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, here we are, a year from the Scottish Parliament election, and rather than having a government who comes to this Parliament offering a bold vision for an economic, prosperous Scotland, we once again have an SNP First Minister standing on a history of broken promises and economic decline, on a record of failure and missed targets, on a background of decline in education and health, coming to this chamber with a programme for government that demonstrates just how out of ideas and out of time this devolved SNP government is. We have industries the length and breadth of this country crying out for innovation and bold policies when it comes to a just transition and energy security. In the North East, we know how hard our oil and gas sector have worked to ensure that oil and gas production in Scotland is world-leading, ethical and green, and providing vital resources for our economic well-being. But instead, this SNP government continues with a presumption against new oil and gas and are determined to close off this vital resource to our country's energy needs. And this is a government who remains opposed to small nuclear developments, close to where energy is needed and central to achieving our net zero ambitions. If I've got time, I'll come back to you. Despite all the science and all the experts telling them what a vital contribution small nuclear can make to the resilience of our energy production, they remain Luddites when it comes to nuclear. And the energy strategy is years late, and there's no sign of it in the programme for government. And we all know why this is, Presiding Officer. It's because the SNP are a divided party on this subject. They are trying to satisfy their members that understand that jobs and wealth created by the oil and gas industry can provide an economic boost to Scotland and pay for our public services. And you have the other half who want to cosy up to the extremist Greens and are throwing tens of thousands of jobs under the bus. And, Presiding Officer, we have communities from the south to the north desperately asking the Scottish Government to listen to their concerns on energy infrastructure. For the good of our incredible countryside, I plead with the SNP government to not carpet bomb our rural communities with monster pylons, substations and battery storage. The devolved government need to press the pause button until we have an energy strategy so we can have the right development in the right place. Instead of using this programme for government to set out a common-sense approach to energy production and infrastructure in Scotland, we are just getting the same old nonsense from the SNP. And when it comes to ACORN, does the First Minister think that people in the North East zip up the back, promising a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow when his government have failed to spend a penny of the £80 million 2022 cash? Plus, the First Minister even popped up to St Fergus last year to announce another £2 million. That seems to be all the SNP have left in that fund. The Scottish Conservatives are offering a way forward that is based on common sense. If we are still using oil and gas, then let's use the resources that we have rather than importing them from abroad. If we have a good renewable industry, let's work with them to innovate and move forward. Since we have a thriving agricultural sector, let's build them up and not impose unfair taxes on them like the Labour government has. The Scottish Conservatives will work with the Scottish people towards economic growth and prosperity for all, not sacrifice economic growth at the altar of independence. Presiding Officer, this is a government that is out of time and out of ideas. This programme for government shines a light on the failure of the past 18 years and the history of failed promises and broken commitments. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. I now call Martin Whitfield to be followed by Stuart McMillan. Up to 4 minutes.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer, and it's a privilege to speak on behalf of Scottish Labour in this programme for government, and also to follow Douglas Lumsden, who, with the greatest kindness to him, is never knowingly under-metaphored. But he did talk about the importance of nuclear power, which allows me to make mention, because we've already talked about Grangemouth and the decisions that perhaps should have been taken 5 years ago that would have made the situation today very different. And of course, Torness in East Lothian has but 5 years on its current licensed production of energy. So it will be interesting to see the intervention from the current SNP Scottish Government with the warning of 5 years to go. But I did welcome the First Minister's focus on seeking solutions rather than disagreements in the statement that was the precursor to this debate. The challenge, of course, that the SNP Scottish Government has is that the solutions that they've previously promised have virtually all been failed to be delivered. But I do welcome, as others have done, the ending of the 8 a.m. lottery and the abolition of peak fares. Because it is important that, firstly, we start to see an improvement in our NHS rather than an ongoing decline. And it is also important with regard to rail fares, and the abolition has been welcomed by the RMT, that we can get people back onto the trains. But if we look at some of those previous promises, there are challenges that this current Scottish Government have to face. And I think to avoid facing up to those means that the promises that have been made in this programme for government will fall again and fail. There are only 6 bills coming forward in the final year, plus 2 bills that exist from year 4 that are going to be brought forward. And one of them, which has already been mentioned in this debate, is the non-surgical cosmetic procedures, which I very much welcome. I would also then strongly suggest that the Kerr reform bill comes back to this place before summer recess to make space for that cosmetic procedures bill so that it's not lost as we move to the tail end of this session. But I do, in the short time that I have, like to go back over some of the previous promises, assurances and solutions. Scrapping the council tax for under 22s. We have to go back to 2021, and the SNP manifesto for that doesn't seem to have been delivered. The Youth Persons Guarantee, that manifesto promised to fund the university college, apprenticeship, the skills needs that we've heard so much about this afternoon, training places or indeed jobs for every young person. And yet we have 84,000 young people not in education, employment or training. And to the CAMS service that a number of contributors have mentioned this afternoon. And I welcome the fact that the government constantly heralds the fact it now hits its CAMS targets. But is that not at the price of removing a significantly large number of children entirely from those waiting lists and sending them to other pathways that don't yet exist? And the failure to invest the 10% that's been promised with only 8%. And indeed, it was in March that NHS Tayside, on their calculation, said it would take a decade for those added to the CAMS waiting lists today to be seen. Current applicants, and we are talking about young people and children, a waiting time of 6 years. In 2018, the then SNP First Minister met with Jamie Oliver and said that childhood obesity would be halved by 2030. They would reduce that to 7%. It now stands at 17%. I could go on for the next 4 pages of broken promises relating to our young people, but I will leave it at there, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. We now come to the final speaker in the open debate, Stuart McMillan. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First of all, I think just on the back of Martin Whitfield's comments with regards to the 5 bills to be introduced, I think just for completeness, there are 2 bills already introduced in this session. 2 bills have still to be introduced in addition to the 14 bills already in the parliamentary process. So it does highlight that this Parliament will be busy over the course of the next year. Very briefly,
Martin Whitfield.
Take an intervention, and of course that was my request, to move the Kerr bill forward so that there was space for these new bills to be finalised along with the others. Would you welcome that?
Stuart McMillan.
Okay, thank you. Presiding Officer, I am pleased to speak in today's debate following the First Minister setting out his clear vision for our country and also for the people who live here. And I want to focus most of my contribution on an issue first raised with me in 2018 by one of my constituents, Jill Best, who is a nurse who has worked in medical aesthetics since 2010. Now, at the time, I was surprised to learn that injectable treatments using prescription-only medicines were being offered without any regulatory framework. And that's why I really am delighted with the announcement that the Scottish Government is to legislate in this area. The introduction of the non-surgical cosmetic bill will be welcomed by many people across the country, and I know it also does have cross-party support. We've obviously just heard from Martin Whitfield. I also know that Mellis Briggs MSP, Ros McCall MSP, in addition to my own colleague Colin Beattie MSP, have all been involved in supporting this particular campaign. I also want to thank Jenny Minto MSP, the Public Health and Women's Health Minister, for meeting and listening to the campaigners from the sector, and also for helping to get this bill into the programme for government. So thank you, Minister. The bill will help deliver a safer non-surgical cosmetic sector, and a sector that will be safer for all of its clients. That's everyone who lives in Scotland. Now, the industry has grown significantly since my first discussion with Jill Best, and yet the lack of regulation leaves authorities uncertain about the industry's actual size in Scotland. This is why regulation is so critical, not only for improving patient safety, but also for gaining oversight into the number of businesses offering these treatments at the moment. Now, having recognised these concerns earlier, I repeatedly wrote to the Scottish Government highlighting Jill's worries and emphasising the need for action. So the non-surgical cosmetic sector is here to stay, and it will continue to expand. So it does make the legislation absolutely imperative. Now, the reports of botched procedures, as we will all know, we've read the papers, we've seen the items online. So these reports, including tragic fatal cases, have fuelled concerns about unqualified practitioners. So this is deeply concerning, and it risks misleading patients into thinking that the sector currently is totally safe, when obviously there are individuals who are operating who are not properly qualified. Now, I will go on to touch upon another couple of issues, and that's the other aspects in this programme for government. It certainly struck me by the contrast between the politics in Scotland and also the rest of the UK. Now, our First Minister reiterated his commitment to eradicating child poverty while growing the economy, investing in public services and also tackling the climate emergency. Now, meanwhile, prior to July 2024, the UK had a government that actively worked against these priorities. Now there is a Labour government in Westminster that has failed to deliver on its election promises. Now, I remember Mr Sarwar assured the nation, "Read my lips, no austerity under Labour." His silence is deafening, and the fact that the Welsh Labour First Minister is calling out her UK Labour government colleagues speaks volumes. So I welcome this programme for government, and I certainly look forward to working with colleagues across the chamber as the bills proceed through the Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr McMillan. We move to wind-up speeches. I call first Gillian Mackay. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Mackay.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The health announcements in this programme for government are small snippets of NHS reform, and they don't, as a whole, deliver the wide-scale change we need to see in terms of how we use the health service and treat ill health. The national conversation that had previously been suggested seems to have disappeared. There are good moves, such as the recognition from government that we must vastly increase the number of people seen in the community at an earlier point. I have some real concerns, as do RCGP, on the timescale and sustainability of this. Increasing the number of GP appointments is a laudable goal, but given our current GP workforce and the existing pressures they face, a focus on quantity alone risks backfiring. Patients and GPs alike value the quality of care, yet the programme for government remains silent on that. Beyond the 100,000 enhanced GP service appointments for those with key risk factors, how many more people are going to see their GP? Do all of these proposed enhanced appointments require a GP in the first place? Blood pressure monitoring is often carried out by practice nurses. Diverting that into GPs reduces GP capacity, doesn't increase it. Also, what is an enhanced service GP appointment in the first place? Training and retaining more GPs has to be a core part of any expansion in primary care. That requires more money across the board. And while enhanced or more regular appointments for certain health conditions may be a good idea, there is nothing in this programme for government to improve and protect the health of the nation, key to keeping people well and prevent the need for some of these appointments in the first place. The launch of an initial version of a health and social care app could be a huge step forward. There are already examples, good and bad, of digital interaction with patients to learn from. The Badger app for maternity care, I believe, would be a good place to start pinching ideas. The app allows you to see appointments, blood tests and blood pressure monitoring. It also enables patients to message their midwives, who often reply the same day. For some with long-term conditions like diabetes, inputting blood glucose levels for review by a clinician would prevent some outpatient appointments being needed, saving individuals from travel to hospital if they don't need to for review, as well as freeing up appointment times. That's just one example, and I hope that these things are being taken into account to improve efficiency. It's not mentioned in the programme for government, but I hope that this also implies that we will see a single health record at the very least to underpin the app, something the Scottish Greens have called for a long time. The Pharmacy First expansion is hugely welcome, and I hope will include work on my call from earlier in the year and that of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society to increase patient information that pharmacists can have about patients to be able to fully realise the potential of Pharmacy First. And while the test to prevent secondary stroke is a good step forward, there are other treatments we should be funding too. The transformational potential of thrombectomy to prevent and reduce disablement after a stroke cannot be understated. We currently only have a mostly Monday to Friday 9 to 5 service, and you have to be lucky enough to have your stroke during working hours. Not enhancing this service is costing both money and people's health. Any additional funding in mental health services reverses previous cuts, but we also have a looming crisis with a lack of pathways for those looking for an autism or ADHD diagnosis. I know government believes that we should just be providing people with the support they need regardless of whether they have a diagnosis or not. And while this is something we should be striving for, we can't rely on all workplaces or learning environments to take that approach without a diagnosis. Beyond that, we shouldn't ever underestimate the validation and relief that a diagnosis in itself has for individuals. And I appreciate that having people looking for that diagnosis on the same waiting list as those with severe and enduring mental health conditions may not be the right place, but a pathway is very clearly needed. I've rapidly run out of time, Presiding Officer, and there are a good few other issues I would have liked to have touched on, including the work that needs to go on in Grangemouth to secure the future of industry, the lack of any mention of improving terms and conditions for social care workers, and the very welcome scrapping of peak rail fares. We have to see government turn these promises into tangible achievements that have the impact Scotland needs.
Thank you. I now call Michael Manna up to 6 minutes. Mr Manna.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Today's slimmed-down programme for government has to be compared to the long list of broken promises which does define this SNP government. So let's imagine for a few moments the path not travelled. The path not travelled. The imaginary Scotland where a child cycles to school on his free bike, a free laptop in his bag, passing the newly refurbished play park, finishing a can of iron brew and promptly return it to the reverse vending machine where he claims his 20p. Little Jimmy doesn't need to worry if he falls off his bike and breaks his leg. He'll be immediately whisked to one of Scotland's national treatment centres in an ambulance that was requested on the NHS app. His family are off on holiday in the summer, zooming up Scotland's premier road, the long-since-duelled A9. then heading west to catch one of Scotland's many reliable ferries with real and absolutely not painted on windows. And after the holidays, Jimmy Waits looks forward to receiving his exam certificate from the exam board, which of course is entirely different from the SQA, because the Education Secretary, John Swinney, meant what he said when he scrapped the body that he had told to cut the grades of the poorest kids. And after school, no thank you Mr Hoy, after school Jimmy looks forward to a career in the Saudi Arabia of renewables, with a reformed national skills programme supporting him in his ambition. And when he buys his own home, the hated council tax is but a distant memory, because it was scrapped by Alex Salmond and John Swinney as far back as 2007. And of course, in the far future of old age, Presiding Officer, Jimmy rests secure in the knowledge that the National Care Service will be there to look after him. The path not travelled, Presiding Officer. Instead, we are back in the real world, where none of that is true, where none of it was delivered, and where the First Minister entreats us to believe that a corner is being turned. But he is the one who has been leading us down this road for 18 years. And of course, why a corner needs turning is the right question, Presiding Officer. The answer is, of course, this record of a government. Every inch of that long record is John Swinney's, and it's not one that this limp, lukewarm excuse for a programme for government addresses. Jackie Baillie set out just some of that record of SNP failure that has laid our NHS low. Martin Whitfield highlighted the record on CAMS and the fiddling of the figures on waiting lists. So I met with the NHS Tayside on Friday, and I can confirm absolutely that in my area it's a complete mess. Now a new pathway being developed to take the kids back into CAMS. 4,500 children in Dundee thrown aside. A Dundee GP yesterday, I know the First Minister was talking to some, so was I, called this a disaster and a disgrace. And no wonder. GPs are clear that it's the SNP's closure of 25% of the surgeries in Dundee, and the fact that they have had their patient lists increased by 37% is what is creating a crisis in general practice. 5 NHS plans in 4 years. In public they say they work, in private they acknowledge they are, in the words of the former First Minister, awful. And that is the right word, of course, and it's a word that well describes the attitude to public money. The SNP has wasted £6 billion of taxpayers' money on ferries that don't sail, the scandal of delayed discharge, and a national care service that won't deliver a single extra carer. And I would conclude, Presiding Officer, when the First Minister says today, do you have 4 minutes or 6, Presiding Officer? 6. I will keep going then. Plenty more of this to come. And the word that describes their approach to public money. The scandal of delayed discharge. And they have refused to repeat on all of these issues in the public finances the warnings from the Auditor General, the Scottish Fiscal Commission, the Fraser of Allender Institute, the Finance Committee and the Institute for Fiscal Studies about the grave threats that face Scotland's public finances. And today, of course, the First Minister did announce yet another Labour policy, the scrapping of peak rail fares. It's a policy, of course, he whipped his SNP MSPs to vote against just last year. An email correspondence released under Freedom of Information shows that last August, his own Finance Secretary, Shona Robison, advised, "We simply can't afford this, given the financial position." So what changed? What changed? £5.2 billion, £5.2 billion of money from the Labour government changed that situation. Gladly.
Kevin Stewart.
Mr Mara has said that the SNP government has stolen Labour policies. I think the Scottish public will be thankful that we haven't stolen the policies of keeping the 2-child benefit cap, or slashing winter fuel payments for our pensioners, or cutting benefits to disabled people.
Michael Mara.
Well, I thank Mr Kevin for his points there. I think it's fair to say that in challenging financial circumstances across the whole of the UK, the additional £5.2 billion that was brought to from the UK Labour government to the Scottish Government's budget is what has enabled some of those new policies in this programme for government today. And I know that you would all be welcoming it on those benches. No, thank you, Mr Gray. I'm sure he'd be welcome that. So with 20% of the parliamentary term left,
Mr Mara, could you resume your seat? Could I encourage the government front bench, please? I will give you an opportunity to respond to the debate in due course. You do not need to pass a running commentary on Mr Marra's contribution. Mr Marra, if you could begin concluding.
Presiding officer, with 20% of the parliamentary term left to run, this is not a case as the SNP clearing the decks for an election, rather than setting up the country for success. John Swinney, frankly, in his response to Mark Griffin, I thought, let the cat something out of the bag. When we were focusing on the issue of homeless children in Scotland, he said, and I quote, "Move on, find something else to talk about, find something else to moan about." The Labour Party won't, and we'll see you at the ballot box.
Yeah. Thank you. I now call Sanders Gulhani up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and Register of Interest as a practising NHS GP. And as a GP, I know what it means to deliver care under pressure. The pressure we face today is not a passing crisis. It's the result of 18 years of SNP mismanagement. Scotland's health is deteriorating. Waiting lists are longer, GP and mental health access is harder, and as for our NHS staff, they're stretched beyond reason. The so-called 8 a.m. GP lottery is just one symptom of a broken system. John Swinney says he'll fix it, but based on his record, we know what that probably means. It probably means 9 a.m. lotteries, more excuses, more blames, and no accountability. And this isn't just an NHS problem. The illness runs deeper. In education, where the attainment gap persists and curriculum fails our young people. In transport, where projects are delayed and over budget and unreliable. In the economy, where small businesses are stifled by red tape and uncertainty. Everything this government touches ends up weaker, sicker and more fragile. This programme for government should have been a treatment plan, focused, urgent, effective. Instead, it's the same tired prescription, central control, poor planning and even worse delivery. When it comes to the SNP outcomes, it's Scotland that suffers. Rachel Hamilton told us that after 18 years, this SNP government is out of ideas because the SNP grandstand with laudable targets but never achieve them, never deliver, never have a clue on how to achieve their target. Multiple members have told us that the war on car drivers continues. Higher parking fees in my city of Glasgow by the SNP. More potholes and no progress to fully dual the A9. Yet another broken promise. I agree with Jackie Bailey when she said that the RCN said there are not enough nurses to deliver safe care. Imagine that. Not enough nurses to deliver safe care. The SNP have fiddled CAMS figures, and they were talking about it with such pride. Tim Eagle spoke of how the rural budget has been cut. Rural housing funding went to Edinburgh to build Edinburgh housing. No crofting bill yet, leading to failure after failure after failure for the people of rural Scotland. Douglas Lumsden reminded us that the SNP are devastating the northeast of our country by destroying our oil and gas industry. We need an affordable transition, and the Scottish Government is not being honest with Scots about the fact the average person will be paying for the SNP failed transition. Presiding Officer, our NHS is on life support. Patients wait longer, staff are exhausted, and services are crumbling under pressure. And we know this isn't new. It's the result of 18 years of SNP failure. And now the First Minister heralds a year of delivery. What staggering self-delusion. We've all seen SNP plans before. Humza Yousaf's shameful, flimsy NHS recovery plan, supported by John Swinney and the entire SNP front bench. At the time, we called it out as being useless and not fit for purpose. We now discover that then First Minister Nicola Sturgeon agreed with us and said on WhatsApp she was reading a revised draft of the recovery plan and still feeling the need to translate parts of it into acceptable English. And this is before she reached anything of substance. Nicola Sturgeon went on to say that her specific concern is that it's awful. And that's the recovery plan that John Swinney stood up and clapped. Where was John Swinney in improving our NHS then? At the heart of government and destroying the NHS. This programme for government is hypocrisy on steroids. The WhatsApp messages about this statement are likely to be wonderful reading in the future. And this ultimately is the SNP in a nutshell, floundering, incompetent, infighting, and then foisting half-baked ideas onto the people of Scotland. Meanwhile, waiting lists grow, staff morale plummets, and the public pays the price. But this isn't just about health. It's the same story in education, in transport, in the economy. A government that overpromises, underdelivers and never takes responsibility. In fact, on debate night, Fulton McGregor spoke about how the government is as honest as it can be. The SNP's record is not one of government, it's one of managed decline. And Scotland deserves so much better. We don't need another year of slogans. We need competence, urgency and leadership that puts people before party. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call on Neil Gray to wind up the debate. Cabinet Secretary, up to 9 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'd like to begin by thanking the members of this Parliament for their contributions today. I think there's been a bit of a theme, Presiding Officer. Those MSPs who supported the budget, therefore got something to make progress on through the budget process and thereby contributed constructively to the debate, and those who did not, those who banged the tables, shouted loudly but in the end offered nothing, absolutely nothing in terms of ideas, nothing in terms of policies or progress for Scotland. There was an honourable exception. There was an honourable exception, Presiding Officer. Martin Whitfield's first half of his speech was constructive until he gave in to temptation in the second half of his speech and reverted back to type. I will give way to Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful to Neil Gray for taking the intervention. I thank him for his time. Does he agree with me, though, with regard to the question of these bills, that we have a, not backlog, but we have a logjam of bills that we need to shift if these new bills, in particular with reference to the bill that we've referenced a lot? So are we going to see the Kerr bill before summer?
We obviously want to make progress for the reasons that Martin Whitfield set out, and I've got an interest there, and obviously we want to make progress, and the scheduling of these will be brought forward as quickly as possible. Jackie Baillie, in her conclusion, asked about what the SNP priorities are. I can tell her record funding for the NHS, delivering for people accessing health services as we deliver high-quality public services, eradicating child poverty, boosting the economy and delivering against the climate emergency. Meanwhile, Labour in the UK government is projected to increase child poverty, has stifled the economy with the tax on jobs that is increasing employer national insurance contributions, and they've let energy bills go up when they promised to reduce them. They abandoned the WASPy women. Presiding Officer, Labour's failure in government has opened the door to Farage, and they should be ashamed. There are a number of other contributions. I won't be able to turn to all of them, but I wish to pick up on some. Patrick Harvey referenced the peak rail fares removal, and in the spirit of consensus sought to support it. He needs to be reminded that on the pilot last year, this was delivered an extension after the Greens left government. We extended the removal of the peak rail fares pilot for a second time in the summer of 2024, as opposed to while the Greens were in government. I thought there were a number of very good contributions to be reflected on. Emma Roddick delivered a thoughtful contribution on how we counteract the rise of Nigel Farage and the opportunity open to us through independence. I'll take away Sarah Boyack's point regarding the linkage between mental health and economic inactivity, one which we are incredibly cognizant of and something we are delivering against, including in Lothian, where we understand there are specific challenges. I'll give way to Joe Fitzpatrick.
Joe Fitzpatrick. We're not hearing you, Mr Fitzpatrick. I'm going to have to invite the Cabinet Secretary to continue.
Thank you. Kevin Stewart's focused on the health service, Audrey Nicholl on energy and the economy, Stuart McMillan for his work regarding non-surgical cosmetics, while also addressing the fact that this has been a cross-party effort. And also, I will give way.
Kevin Stewart. On the health service issue, and it hasn't really been brought up very much, the expansion of pharmacy first, which I'm very much in favour of. Can the Cabinet Secretary give us assurance that pharmacists themselves will help to come up with the details of that expansion to benefit folk across the country?
Cabinet Secretary. Yes, pharmacists across and others across the primary care sector will be absolutely fundamental to the future success and sustainability of the health service, and I'm happy to give that confirmation. And similarly on the health theme, Gillian Mackay made a series of constructive health-related asks, some of which we are progressing, and I'd be more than happy to pick up in discussion at our next meeting. Because, Presiding Officer, we understand the challenges that people are facing and the issues that families are dealing with. Global, turbulent times have seen costs rise, their impacts pose risks for everyday life. And decisions of Westminster governments have not just worsened the cost of living challenges being faced by the people of Scotland. In many cases, it is the decisions of Westminster governments that are causing the challenges, because Scotland is an afterthought for them. From Brexit to raising energy bills, to austerity in the form of cuts to winter fuel payments for our pensioners. It is our people that suffer. And only when it starts to cost Labour at the ballot box, not when the pain is felt by pensioners, only when the pain threatens their own power, do they brief that they will consider their position. It's so disappointing that we see this from a Labour government, Presiding Officer. And it's in the face of this that we have set out a clear, focused agenda to deliver for people and communities right across the country. Whilst this programme for government sets out what we will do to achieve our key priorities over the coming year, it also underlines the many strengths and successes that have been delivered. Through child poverty levels remaining high, we are making progress. We are investing in early learning and childcare and housing in measures such as the Scottish Child Payment, and these will support families to escape poverty. Child poverty levels in Scotland are falling at a time when they are rising in other parts of the country. In this programme for government, we are ensuring that businesses are in the best possible place to create jobs and grow the economy. A strong, dynamic, growing economy to support measures to invest in eradicating poverty and our public services. Our devolved employability programmes have supported tens of thousands of people to enter in and progress work. Scotland has a track record of success when it comes to attracting investment, and we are consistently outperforming other parts of the UK. But we are not resting on our laurels, and that is why we are accelerating a targeted programme of key engagements with our key investment. Scotland is and will continue to be a globally facing country, one that is open for business. To conclude, Presiding Officer, we have set out a clear, focused agenda to deliver in our programme for government and deliver for the people of Scotland. Indeed, I have set out we are delivering for all of Scotland. This is a programme for government that is focused on hope and delivery. It is a programme that shows that the government understands the reality of the headwinds that people are facing and that we are taking action. We are seeing progress in our health service. A&E waits are down, delayed discharge is down, and more procedures delivered. There is much more for us to do, but we are making progress. And they can't stand that, Presiding Officer, Labour and the Tories, because while we are delivering for the people of Scotland, they are contributing precisely nothing. They opted out of the budget process while others in the Chamber achieved something for the country. They failed to vote for the budget, a budget that is delivering progress on eradicating child poverty, for the economy, to combat the climate emergency and for our public services, because politics is their priority. Well, delivery is ours, and we are delivering, Presiding Officer. They can't stand it. Last year, they don't like it. They're rattled. Farage has got them rattled, presiding officer. Last year, Labour promised to cut energy bills to end austerity, deliver change. Instead, they've shortchanged the people, continued to balance the books on the backs of pensioners and disabled, and they've allowed energy bills to go up.
Let's hear the
That
Cabinet
failure
Secretary.
to deliver has cost the Westminster parties this past week, but not nearly as much as it is costing the public, businesses and our economy. In stark contrast, presiding officer, this is a programme for government from a government that will deliver for the people of Scotland, and I will be proud to work for its delivery and further progress for Scotland.
Thank you. That concludes the debate on Programme for Government 2025 to 2026. It's now time to move on to the next item of business, which is consideration of one Parliamentary Bureau motion. And that item of business is consideration of Parliamentary Bureau Motion 17448 on committee meeting time. And I ask Jamie Hepburn, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, to move the motion.
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. The question on this motion will be put at decision time. And there's one question to be put as a result of today's business. And the question is that motion 17448, in the name of Jamie Hepburn, on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau on committee meeting time, be agreed. Are we all agreed? The motion is therefore agreed. And that concludes decision time, and we'll now move on to members' business in the name of Christine Graham.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.